We'll start in a second here. Thanks for joining me. I did a live stream earlier with my friend Tom. We didn't talk specifically a lot about the details of the actual impeachment scandal, but that's because he had different feelings on it. And I think it's important to talk to people that even have disagreements. So that was what was going on there. But I wanted to talk specifically about my feelings on what's going on with this impeachment situation, particularly in light of the video I did last night about the new evidence from John Solomon. That article is just damning, so I'm going to re-go through that article again. But the point that I'm making with this video, and the big point is, I have not seen one media outlet, not one, deal with the claims that Solomon makes in his article. And these aren't just opinions. He actually links the documents that prove his claims. These claims will take out the two defenses of Biden, that one, the investigation to his son was shut down, and second, that he only wanted the prosecutor fired for corruptions. It destroys both of those claims, which means we're left with the following. Joe Biden threatened with a U.S. $1 billion to extort the Ukraine until they fired the prosecutor that was looking into his son. We know that then went to an agency within the Ukraine that buried the investigation to his son and that had connections with the Obama administration. And we now know that the answer that Biden gave as to why he fired him is not only disputed by the actual prosecutor who just signed an affidavit on September 4th saying that the reason he was fired was because he was looking into Biden's son's company, Burisma, but also by Biden's son's company's own lawyers that say that Shokin was never corrupt in the first place. So it's an absolute bombshell. An absolute bombshell. If you were the media or any Democrats and you were actually interested in ending corruption and foreign influence into elections, you would be all over this. You would at least give some sort of answer. But as always, the media is becoming what you see on Twitter or what like places I would be like Above Top Secret or blogs where you discuss politics. When people don't have an answer to something, they just ignore it. And they hope that the news cycle moves on the next day. So that's what we see the media is becoming more and more. It used to be that they would at least talk about the story, as I'll show you in this first case, and kind of give lip service to it real quick, admit it, and then brush it off by giving some sort of excuse. They're not even doing that with the Solomon piece. And what you'll see is the reason is eventually they'll either flat out ignore it, or if they do talk about it, all the media will come out at the same time because they're all waiting for the talking points from the Democrats to be able to understand how to deal with this argument. Because there isn't an easy answer. Any real investigative journalist would say, holy cow, this is devastating to Biden's claims. And by the way, if Biden was lying, then the entire case for impeachment falls apart for Donald Trump. Because then all of a sudden, it's true. Trump has reasons to want Biden investigated. It's not just a matter of his personal attack wanting to help Trump in the 2020 election by going after his opponent. It's pointing out actual corruption. If you don't think, one, this is election interference. Remember, I've been talking about, I don't hear anyone discussing this other than me. There's many types of election interference you could have. One type is what Trump was accused of doing with the Mueller investigation, which is trying to get dirt to start investigations into your opponent. So trying to get dirt from Russians on his opponent. But another way could be trying to force foreign adversaries or foreign people, foreign agencies to bury investigations that would be going on to you. Both have the same effect of trying to benefit in an illegitimate way the election in 2016. So if you thought investigating election interference was important, you would think that it would be important to investigate, one, Biden and his corruption. Again, we're talking about $1 billion of your U.S. tax dollars, $1 billion, being used as a personal toy by Joe Biden to stop an investigation into his son. That's incredible abuse. That's more abuse than even that most people even talked about ever happening with any president that I could remember. That's unbelievable corruption. You hear people talking about skimming $30,000, $40,000, and that's a big deal. Or exerting pressure in some way or another to get investigation shut down into little things. But to actually stop an investigation that would show corruption into Biden's son, taking foreign oligarchs, serious crimes that could be decades in jail, and using $1 billion of taxpayers, that's unbelievable. Not only that is election interference by seeking to have that buried by using U.S. tax dollars, but the more obvious case of election interference, which we've known about this for at least a year and a half. I've been talking about the Ukraine election meddling. We knew that a woman named Alexandra Chalupa from the DNC went to the Ukraine trying to get dirt on Trump. a former official there named Lushenko, who, by the way, was cited by all the media as, this proves that nothing shady was going on. Lushenko and the agencies of the NABU gave, from an ongoing investigation, dirt to this woman, Chalupa, and other people in the DNC that they then leaked to the media to get Paul Manafort to be fired, which led to an investigation. That's illegal foreign influence. Not only is that illegal based on the definition of what the Democrats gave into what they accused Trump of doing with Russia, but it's certainly illegal in Ukraine. That's why there was an investigation. Because just like the United States, if our FBI has an ongoing investigation, they're not allowed to leak the details of that investigation to people for their own personal benefit. So they broke Ukrainian law and potentially broke U.S. law. It certainly was a more obvious case of election interference than anything Trump was accused of doing with Russia. So why wouldn't we want that investigated? Again, this is all about two things. One, we know that the IG report coming out is going to show that there were all kinds of abuses that went on with Obama's administration and the intel agencies getting foreign help in shady ways, etc. Sorry, got a call there. So this is setting up as a defense of that. Remember, I'm the only one I hear saying this, the only person. What they want you to do as a Trump supporter or someone who's just objective and looking into the truth, the goal is that they want you to say, well, it's okay for Trump to be able to investigate crimes with foreign agencies. Because then they'll say, when the IG report comes out, well, wait a minute, all the Trump people said it was okay for Trump to go to the Ukraine to investigate Biden, so why wouldn't it be okay for Obama to go to Russians or to go to people in the UK or to go to people in Australia to investigate crimes that Trump possibly committed? But there's a difference. I personally don't feel that it's a crime to ask foreign agencies if they have evidence of possible corruption, even if it's your political adversary. When it becomes a crime is when you use that evidence and it is not verified to spy on people or to start investigations into people without it being verified and then leak that information to the press to smear their election chances. That's the crime. The crime wasn't that Obama went to the UK and said, hey, do you have evidence of Trump doing anything illegal? That's not a crime. It might be unethical, it might be shady, but it's not a crime. So don't let them, mark my words, that's what's coming down the pipe in a couple weeks when this IG report comes out. That's what you'll hear all the media saying. That's what you're going to hear everyone on Twitter saying. They're going to say, didn't you Trump supporters just say that it was okay for Trump to get dirt on Biden from the Ukraine? So why would this be any different? The difference is in the details, as I'm giving you. But the other thing is that this was designed to bury the investigation into DNC soliciting foreign interference in the 2016 election. One, directly through Joe Biden, and second, through their interference going through these agencies, through Lushenko and the NABU. That's, by the way, is the same agency that ended up being the one that got the investigation into Biden's son. So they're trying to criminalize investigating their corruption. Think of the gravity of what I'm telling. Just think of this statement. They said for 3 years, the allegation that Trump possibly solicited foreign influence to improperly affect the 2016 election was so severe that we could leave no stone unturned. It was so severe that it warranted, even with unverified evidence paid for by the Hillary Clinton camp, that we had to spy on people connected to Trump's campaign. That we had to talk about this nonstop for 3 years. That's how important the allegation was, because foreign meddling into our elections is that important. Now, when we finally find out, wait a minute, here's an allegation. We actually have more proof of this than anything we had of Trump, which all of that, as the Mueller report showed with Trump, was garbage. But we actually have proof of DNC officials contacting directly the Ukraine to do the exact same thing they accused Trump of, except they really did it. And all of a sudden the Democrats say, no, it is illegal for Trump to seek to investigate that, and that he should be impeached because of it. That's what the media is doing, and that's what the crux of this video and this live stream is going to be about. That there's two things going on. One, their defense of Joe Biden and the corruption of the Democrats. They ignore any evidence that speaks against it. And second, what has been, if you followed my channel, my complaint since the start of Trump's inauguration and all of these investigations into Trump was, if Trump broke the law or people connected to him broke the law, that's fine. They should be punished. All I want is for the application of the law to be applied evenly. And in case after case, we see it's the exact opposite. Every single crime that anyone connected to Trump's been accused of or charged with has been committed by someone connected to the Democrats or the intel agency, and they haven't been charged for it. Every single one, whether it be FARA violations, lying to the FBI, lying to Congress, all of those have been obstruction of justice. They've all been committed either in more severe or more obvious ways by the Democrats. This is yet another example. So the Democrats, let me give you an example of what this is like. Say you're arguing about bias on Twitter and how Twitter has conservative bias and kicks people off and censors conservatives more. What people will do is they'll say, well, technically in each one of those cases, we could look and say that theoretically there was a violation of terms and service. Not always the case, but 95% of the time they could do that. And so then you'll say, yeah, but here's examples of Democrats doing the exact same thing, only worse. Specifically advocating for violence. They don't get kicked off. They don't get censored. The tweets are allowed to stay up. And everyone, the left that wants to defend Twitter just ignores that. That's what the media is doing here. They'll say what Trump did was this horrible crime, but when you could say, here's 15 examples of the Democrats doing the same thing for years, why didn't the media say it was a crime at the time? They just ignore it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this letter that was sent by 3 Democratic senators in May of 2018 to the Ukraine. Now keep in mind, the allegation against Trump is as follows. It is that he improperly had a quid pro quo to the government of the Ukraine for personal benefit. The reasons for this is as follows. One, the quid pro quo, and just in case you don't know what quid pro quo means, that means Trump offered something or threatened something in return for a favor. The reason this would be illegitimate would be if he offered or threatened in turn for a favor that would help him in the 2020 election. That's exactly what I could accuse Joe Biden of doing, by the way. It would help the Democrats in the 2020 election for the evidence of his son's criminal behavior to not be made public, in addition to personally benefiting Joe Biden. But anyways, that's the accusation. Now they say, one, that it didn't have to be a quid pro quo. That's what Schiff and Pelosi have both said. So in other words, Trump didn't have to offer anything. It was a crime for him on his own to seek help in an ongoing investigation from a foreign government. That's absurd. We know that's exactly what the Crossfire Hurricane, the investigation into Trump was. Obama officials and the intel agencies were working with officials in Britain, officials in Australia, people that were connected to the Kremlin, that's where the Christopher Steele information came from, in order to investigate Trump. And it's happened in the past where we've had executive authorities, the intel agency, work with other countries' intel agencies for investigations ongoing in the United States. So clearly that's garbage. So let's go to, okay, it was a quid pro quo. Clearly the transcript doesn't show it was a quid pro quo. But the Democrats are saying that it was implied. Because if you read it, Trump's talking about how much the U.S. does for the Ukraine and how little the EU does for it. And then the Ukrainian president says, I agree, the EU should be doing more and thank you very much for your support. And Trump says, I have a favor to ask of you. Could you investigate corruption and meddling into our 2016 elections? And then the Ukrainian president says, yes, it's very important we do that to end corruption. And then Trump goes, yeah, and by the way, this prosecutor got fired. And people were saying that Joe Biden had something to do with that, and that was corrupt. And this prosecutor was a good man. And the Ukrainian president says, yes, you're right, we need to investigate that. Okay? That's what happened. They're saying, well, even though there wasn't a blatant quid pro quo, even though there wasn't a blatant threat, it was implied by Trump because he talked about the aid, he talked about how well the Ukraine was doing financially, and then he said, I have a favor. That's what they're saying was corruption. That's what they're saying is impeachable and a crime. So, I'm sure most of you people listening have heard this, but I'm going to read it. This is the letter that was sent in May 4th, 2018, from 3 Democratic senators. That would be Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Patrick Leahy, and Senator Bob Menendez. Now, I want you to listen to what it says. This was sent to Litsenko, who was the general prosecutor at the time in May of 2008, basically their highest prosecutor in the Ukraine. This is them. Dear Mr. Prosecutor General, we are writing to express great concern about reports that your office has taken steps to impede cooperation with the investigation of the United States Special Counsel Robert Mueller. As strong advocates for a robust and close relationship with Ukraine, we believe our cooperation should extend to such legal matters regardless of politics. Now stop here. One, they're saying we are concerned that you will not help us with our investigation into Donald Trump. We think that it's important that we cooperate on rooting out corruption through these investigations, regardless of politics. Geez, doesn't it sound like these 3 senators would also be okay with Trump saying the exact same thing? Anyways, it continues. Ours is a relationship built on foundation of respect for the rule of law and accountable democratic institutions. In 4 short years, Ukraine has made significant progress in building these institutions, despite ongoing military, economic, and political pressure from Moscow. We have supported the capacity building process and are disappointed that some in Kiev appear to cast aside these principles in order to avoid the ire of President Trump. Do you see what they're saying? Hey, things have been doing good. You guys have been doing good militaristically and economically, and we've supported that. But we're ashamed to see, and we're very concerned that now you're throwing away the principles that we thought that you had. Doesn't that sound exactly like what they accused Trump of? It's not an obvious quid pro quo, but it could be implied. Just like Trump was saying, hey, you guys have economic success. They're saying, hey, we've supported your economic success. But we kind of are concerned that you're not going to help with this investigation. It's the exact same thing. It finishes up. If these reports are true, we strongly encourage you to reverse course and halt any efforts to impede cooperation with this important investigation. So they are directly linking. By any objective standard, this is a more threatening tone than what Trump said to Zelensky. They're saying, we've supported your economic progress, and we're really disappointed that you're not going to help us investigate Trump. We strongly encourage you to reverse course. Trump didn't say anything like that in his transcript. It wasn't anywhere near that tone. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I personally do not believe that this letter from Menendez, Durbin, and Leahy is a crime. If I'm totally honest, I do not. It could be shady, it could be unethical, but they have every right to do this. I really believe that. My point is, this is a more severe version of what Trump's accused of doing. And so if the Democrats and the media are saying what Trump did was impeachable, then certainly these 3 should have been impeached. But here's the problem. Not only were they not impeached, this was public knowledge. Where did I get this? Where's this letter at? It's at... Here, I'll put the link up. It's at a Senate.gov website. You know what that means? This wasn't hidden information. We know CNN reported this in May of 2018. We know that you could go on the Senate.gov site and find this information. It wasn't hidden. So if all the media is unbelievably outraged at what Trump did in his phone call, and the Democrats are unbelievably outraged, and the entertainment industry, and academia, and Silicon Valley, and your neighbor that's a Democrat, they're all furious, they're outraged, yet they knew this letter was public knowledge. And no one even breathed a word. Not even the Republicans. The Republicans didn't even say, they didn't raise an eyebrow and say, whoa, wait a minute. You can't do this. No one said that. The exact same situation as Trump, only slightly more severe, and no one batted an eye. Now the same people that are freaking out today said nothing back then. And that's outrageous. Now, this was largely ignored. Go ahead, go tune in Anderson Cooper, or tune in Jake Tapper, or whoever your favorite liberal commentator is. Rachel Maddow. Do you hear them talking about this? Again, why is this important before I get to this, right? Before I get specific. Why is it important? Because when we're talking, if it shows that the Democrats and the Republicans both did the same thing, but the entire world's on fire from all the people that control the public narrative, the academia, the entertainment industry, the mainstream media, Silicon Valley, the Democrat politicians. If they're freaking out like this was such a huge damage to our country, what Trump did, but we know the Democrats did the same thing, and they didn't say word one when the Democrats did it, that proves they are full of it. It's further proved by the fact that they all voted for impeachment and suggested impeachment before they even read the transcript. So this is all just political theater. That means regardless of what you think, even if you hate Trump, you have to see that this is corrupt. We are talking about the Democrats usurping the will of the people because someone did the exact same thing that they did, and they didn't have a problem when they did it. It just so happens they're freaked out, not only because it's Trump, because this investigation, when the Democrats did it, it was specifically to continue giving evidence to Bob Mueller that could potentially harm Donald Trump. But when Trump's doing it, it's to have evidence given to an investigation of William Barr and John Huber into possible election interference that would end up harming the Democrats. That's a crime. So investigating Trump, perfectly fine. Investigating Democrats, impeachable crime. If this is allowed to go through, this means that your election, even your votes, even more than now, will never matter. The Democrats and the establishment will be able to usurp the will of the people anytime they want. They will be able to engage in blatant double standards where they do things that they themselves say are impeachable offenses on the regular. It will become illegal to investigate anything that the intel agencies or the establishment Democrats do that is possibly corrupt. Period. That's why this is such a big deal. Do you understand? I don't know how to make this more clear, but it just seems to me like so many people aren't concerned about this. In order for our political system to work, it has to be an open and honest game as much as possible. Now, I know if you're as cynical as me, you say, yeah, right, that ship sailed a long time ago. But still, it has to be as close as possible. So say you're a fan of the NFL. If you have a ref that calls every single play holding on the Steelers, but then when the Ravens have the ball, they never call the hold, that significantly changes the outcome of the game and means that the game is corrupt and doesn't matter. It's the same in politics. If it's illegal to investigate crimes of one side, and you can impeach the people trying to do it, but then that side themselves can do the exact same things to investigate the other side, and they don't consider it illegal, that's the end of our political system. So I read you the letter. You know that it's those senators, 3 senators, in May of 2018, doing a more severe version of what all the Democrats in the media are accusing Trump of doing. You also know that that was May 2018. That's over a year ago. Not one person breathed that they should be impeached. Not one person breathed that this was destroying our country, that this was unethical. No one. None of the people that are screaming today about Trump needing to be impeached and it's a horrible crime and he's destroying the country because of this. Not one said a word. Not Nancy Pelosi, not Chuck Schumer, not Rachel Maddow, not Anderson Cooper, not Jake Tapper. None of them. No one said a word. Not Adam Schiff. They did not say a word. The exact same behavior they're saying now destroyed the country and we need to impeach Trump. And it's public knowledge for over a year and they didn't say a word. Now, to my surprise, I watched over and over. People started saying this on right-wing news sources. People were saying this on Twitter. People like me were making videos of it. When would the Democrats respond? And so they don't respond. They just ignore it because it's evidence that disproves their claim. It proves that they're not serious. It proves that this is corrupt, that the entire impeachment effort's a sham. It proves all of that. And it proves even if it wasn't a sham, then they would be out there calling for the resignation and impeachment of these 3 senators. But they're not. Again, one defense you could say is, well, maybe the Democrats, even though this was public knowledge, were unaware of it. Well, it's public knowledge now. Everyone's talking about it, at least on the Republican side. So why aren't the Democrats demanding these 3 senators be impeached? So finally, after scouring the internet, the great folks at CNN, it turns out, actually fact-checked this claim. So I want to read through this article and show you how corrupt the media and the Democrats are. I'll post a link to the article so you can read along with me if you want, but I'll try to... I know people say I talk a little fast, so I'll try to slow down at least when I'm reading. The title of the article is Fact Check. Trump falsely claims Democrat letter made threat to Ukraine. This is by Daniel Dale, and it was yesterday at 2:14 p.m. is when they finally addressed this. Under fire for asking Ukrainian President Zelensky to investigate potential 2020 opponent Joe Biden, President Trump argued at a Wednesday press conference that Democratic senators were the actual guilty parties. Excuse me. Trump spoke of a letter that 3 Democrat senators wrote in 2018 to Ukraine's prosecutor general, claiming in the letter they implied that their support for U.S. assistance to Ukraine was at stake and that if they didn't do the right thing, they wouldn't get any assistance. Doesn't that sound familiar? Stop here. Trump is absolutely right. That is exactly what the Democrats are accusing Trump of. They're saying in Trump's transcript and phone call that he implied that his support for U.S. assistance to Zelensky was at stake if they didn't do him a favor and investigate the people he wanted investigated. That's exactly what the Democrats are alleging is an impeachable offense and a crime that was done by Donald Trump. So Trump's saying this was the same thing. They implied that their assistance was on the line if they didn't continue to give evidence to investigate Donald Trump. Moving on. He accused Democratic Senators Chris Murphy of having literally threatened Zelensky during a recent trip to Ukraine, alleging that Murphy said that if he doesn't do things right, they won't have Democratic support in Congress. Now, that's not this letter. That's a separate incident, which is also worth investigating. But anyways, moving on. Later in the press conference, Trump said, I just told you about senators that threatened him with votes and no money coming into Ukraine if they do things. That's really what people were trying to say that I did. Trump's absolutely right. Continuing. But the only difference is I didn't do it. There was no quid pro quo. But there was with Biden, but there was with Biden and there was with these senators. And they threatened, they said, you do this, you do that. We're not going to give you the votes. That's the real deal. And Trump's right. This is exactly what they're accusing him of. Now, Trump, you could say, spinning it because these Democrats didn't specifically say quid pro quo either in their letter. But they definitely attached, they said, we would be very concerned. We strongly urge you to reverse course. We've supported your economic development. They say that more clearly than Trump said it. But clearly, Trump's putting his spin just like the Democrats are putting their spin on his transcript. CNN says, we fact-checked Trump's claims about Biden and Ukraine here. This time, let's start with the letter. Now, this is the same CNN that's saying, clearly Trump was threatening them. Clearly he was. That's what they're saying about his phone call. His phone call that never specifically mentioned the aid, nothing about it, never made any threats, never made quid pro quo. The same phone call that Katie Tur at CNN cut out over 500 words to make it seem as if Trump said, can you do me a favor? Will you investigate Joe Biden? That is not what he said. CNN changed that. But that same transcript of that call is what they're saying. Despite no proof of a quid pro quo. Well, we know that Trump implied the threat. That's what they're saying. So, back to CNN. Here's their first section on this letter. It almost defies belief how corrupt they are. Quote, a request, not a threat. Facts first. The 2018 letters from Leahy, Durbin, and Menendez does not include any threat at all about U.S. assistance to Ukraine or anything else. It doesn't even mention U.S. assistance. That's literally the exact paragraph you could say about the Trump transcript. The exact paragraph you could say. Yet CNN's foaming at the mouth that this proves Trump's guilt. It's unbelievable. Where are the people in the mainstream media? So many people just get their information from these people and don't realize how much they're lying. It's absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't get more shameful than this. Moving on from this article. So it didn't even mention assistance and there was no threat. Quoting again, rather it expressed concern about a New York Times article that said the Ukraine had, with the aim of avoiding Trump's anger, stopped cooperating with Robert Mueller investigation and frozen investigation into Ukraine-related activities of Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman. Now keep in mind, right around the time that Trump called Zelensky, guess what was in the New York Times? Guess what article was there? That's when the New York Times did their article about there being potential conflict of interest with Biden because his son was on this board. So here it is literally the exact same situation. They're saying, well, these senators had just wrote a story in the New York Times that said that Ukraine was not going to give the U.S. dirt on Donald Trump for their investigations or give them evidence. So they were expressing concern over it. Just like Trump heard in the New York Times that it turned out that Biden might have did something very corrupt to bury the investigation into his son. Why is one legitimate and the other is a crime? What is the difference? Further quoting, it says, it urged Ukraine to, quote, reverse course if the Times story was accurate. Okay. Isn't that exactly what Trump's accused of? Hey, what the senators are saying is, hey, you better keep giving us this evidence. If you don't give us evidence into the investigation of Trump, we strongly urge you to reverse course. Trump didn't strongly urge. He just said, can you do me a favor? Can you help us with election meddling evidence you might have there? That's it. That's all he said. So clearly what these senators said was worse. Moving on. Manafort, a longtime lobbyist, had worked as an advisor to former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. I can't pronounce it. You get it. Receiving millions of dollars for his work. He was subsequently convicted of multiple financial crimes related to payments he received from Ukraine, which he laundered to avoid paying taxes. Okay, so Biden might be guilty as well. Moving on. It is difficult to conclusively fact-check Trump's claim that the Democrats' letter implied that assistance to the Ukraine was at stake. Different people read between the lines differently. That is, my rage is through the roof at that statement. Do you see CNN, who reported on this letter back in May of 2018, that knew about this, that has been going foaming at the mouth 24/7 since this whistleblower allegation, that has now read the transcript, that has said that that transcript proves corruption. Without a doubt, it proves it. Says, well, in this case, different people could read different things between the lines. So no investigation warranted. I don't even know what to say. People cite CNN. They're citing these people. Like this is the only article I could find addressing these Democratic senators' letter. People take them seriously. I could literally take the entire paragraph they just wrote, sans the Manafort part, and change the word to be about Trump's transcript, and it would apply just as much. Finishing up in this paragraph, it says, the senator's letter in no way calls for the conditioning of U.S. security assistance to the Ukraine. The senator said in a joint statement Wednesday. Let me reread this paragraph. Let me read it again, what it says. Just this one paragraph. Indulge me for a moment. The senator's letter was written in response to a New York Times report. The senator's letter in no way calls for the conditioning of U.S. security assistance to the Ukraine. Now, let me just change a couple words. The president's call was in response to a New York Times report. The president in no way calls for the conditioning of U.S. security assistance to the Ukraine. The exact same situation if I put the president's name in instead of senators. CNN thinks one's guilty and deserves to be impeached. The other doesn't even warrant investigation. They've known about it for a year and never raised an eyebrow once. They themselves admit, well, different people could read different things between the lines. So if you thought that, you would say, okay, reasonable people could think that these senators are guilty or they're not guilty. So if you've known that since 2018, wouldn't you have been saying, hey, a lot of people can look at this and say these senators are guilty and need to be impeached? And you might think, well, CNN wouldn't have really have thought that. That's why they didn't do it. Exactly, you're right. Which proves that they're lying right now when they're saying that they think Trump needs to be impeached. How do they have any credibility after this? Moving on. Oh, my God. Do you see, by the way, one of my frustrations is, like, you talk about stuff like this, and no one responds. Do you see anyone talking about? Has anyone that you've seen even on Twitter or on, Hannity or anything, have they gone through this like I'm doing? Why is it that some fat guy on a chair, I'm doing more research. You know how much I'm getting paid for this? I don't even have my YouTube videos monetized. I get nothing. And I feel like I'm shouting in the wind. I get 10 people to listen to me. And it's like, it doesn't matter that the facts are there. It doesn't matter that you could point them out. You get trolls that just say, yeah, you're wrong, you're a liar. And then everyone else ignores it. Yes, there are those of us that are looking into it because we care about the country and we care about ending corruption, but there's very few of us. It's unbelievably frustrating. Where are the Republicans? Why aren't they doing what I'm doing right now? Why isn't Lindsey Graham in front of cameras right now in a press conference? One, issuing subpoenas to Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Second, demanding all the phone calls that Biden made involving Ukraine or China. And third, going through CNN articles like this showing how ridiculously corrupt they are. Where's Trump's people doing this? Why? Why aren't they doing it? Sorry, I'd probably come off as whiny and annoying, but I am a little PO'd about it. Further quoting, the letter was written while Petro Poroshenko was president of Ukraine. It said the senators were disappointed that some in Kiev appeared to have cast aside principles of their shared relationship like respect for the rule of law and accountable democratic institutions in an attempt to avoid the ire of President Trump. Ironically, Shokin, the fired prosecutor, the one that Biden had fired, claims that Poroshenko, the very guy they're talking about here, the former president of Ukraine, told him that he had to drop the investigation into Burisma, and that's why he was fired, because he wouldn't drop the investigation. So I could read this paragraph to say, the president was disappointed that people in Kiev appeared to have cast aside principles of their shared relationship like respect for the rule of law and accountable democratic institutions in an attempt to avoid the ire of Vice President Biden. The exact same thing. The exact same thing. And CNN ignores it. The guy that wrote this article probably believes his garbage. Further quoting, if these reports are true, we strongly encourage you to reverse course and halt any efforts to impede cooperation with this important investigation, the letter said. As you know, I've already read that. The letter concluded with 3 questions to Ukraine's prosecutor general. It asked whether his office had indeed taken steps to stop cooperating with Mueller, whether anyone acting for the Trump administration had asked Ukraine to do so, and whether the Mueller probe had been raised during previous bilateral meetings between the two countries. So it was asking for evidence that could be used against Trump. Next section, urging an investigation, it says. I'm quoting, Trump was not the only prominent Republican to wrongly describe the letter. Now, do you see how they blatantly said in the section above, well, people could interpret it differently. Now, all of a sudden, remember what the title of this piece was? Fact check. Trump falsely claims Democrats' letter made threat to Ukraine. And then they say, well, someone could read it to say that if they read between the lines. Now they say, Trump wasn't the only Republican to wrongly describe the letter. Couldn't I say CNN wasn't the only network to wrongly describe Trump's transcript? Do you see how ridiculous they are? They go from saying, yes, people could read between the lines and think what they want of this, up, but the Republicans and Trump are wrong. Meanwhile, the Trump transcript is the exact same way. It doesn't specifically offer a quid pro quo, but trust us when we tell you that's what it means. Further quoting, in a tweet earlier on Wednesday, RNC committee chairwoman Ronna McDaniel said, in 2018, Democrat senators wrote a letter to Trump urging them to investigate the real Donald Trump. That's true. That's not wrongly describing the letter. That's exactly what they did. So CNN lies again. On Thursday morning, Trump retweeted a tweet from his son Donald Jr. that amplified another Twitter user's claim that Democrats' letter had asked the Ukraine to investigate Trump. It did! Facts first, it says. The letter did not call for an investigation of Trump. Again, the senators urged the prosecutor to not stop the investigation into Trump and to not stop cooperating with Mueller because they are worried about Trump's reaction, and they asked if Trump had encouraged the Ukraine to stop cooperating. So what they're trying to say here is, well, they didn't say start investigating. They said don't stop investigating. It's the same thing. If Ukraine, as they're claiming, was stopping the investigation and the cooperation, then what this letter was doing was asking them to start cooperating and start the investigation. Again, but it's still to start it. So they lie. They're trying to act like, well, we parsed it exactly this way. Technically, it wasn't to start a brand new investigation. It was just to start the investigation that they had recently stopped up again. This is why I said it was important before the transcript came out. If we had any kind of competent media to go to all these Democrats and go to all these media people and say, what exactly would be impeachable? You tell us what the crime would be. Because what they always try to do is say, well, this situation's just slightly different. So anytime the Democrats do it, it's perfectly reasonable and we shouldn't have an investigation. But if the Republicans do it, then it's a crime and it's impeachable. The exact same situation, which is a little nuanced difference. In fact, now they're saying not only do you allow the Democrats to do it and not allow the Republicans to do it. You actually say it's a crime to even question the Democrats to look into it. That's a crime. It goes on about the claim about Murphy in the next part, and it just says, we don't know whether that's true or not because we don't have the transcript of what he said about Murphy. Now, am I the only one who's outraged by that? Go ahead, look for another. I Googled it. I DuckDuckGo'd it. That's all I see about the Senate Democrat letter. Have you heard? I saw Adam Schiff when he did press conferences, and he talked about how it didn't even need a quid pro quo for this to be illegal. Not one person in the press said, well, wait a minute. What do you think about the 3 Democratic senators that did this? Please, by all means, if you're out there, send me anything of any media person talking about these 3 letters or these 3 Democratic senators that sent this letter. CNN was all I could find. And I know I'm partisan. This is one of the problems with talking to myself all the time, you know, when I'm just sitting here doing this myself. Maybe I'm nuts. Am I nuts? Is there any person, even if you hate Trump, that has any shred of integrity that could read that and not say, wow, that's CNN is saying exactly, CNN's defense of these 3 senators is the exact defense Trump is using to defend himself. The exact same thing. These senators did exactly what Trump's accused of doing, and they thought it was, not only was it no problem, it didn't even warrant raising an eyebrow. I mean, they could have wrote articles like, wow, this looks shady, but, you know, maybe not. They didn't even do that. They waited till 3 days after Republicans were making this point and then just said, well, it's just those Republicans interpreting things like the way they want. Not like us, that we're objective, and when we interpret things, trust us, it's always the truth. That's half of my live stream today. How long? 41 minutes. That's half. I haven't even got to the part that's really angering me. Now, again, it's incredibly frustrating. And I can't thank you all that watch me enough. Yes, there is part of me. I am human. I am conceited. I would love to do politics because I think I could help the country. I would love to do stuff like this more and have time to it. But I work 70 hours a week. But even if I don't get better at this or get more people listening to me or ever do anything with it other than just what I'm doing now, I still love doing it. I'm still having fun. But please believe me when I say that the real reason that I'm unbelievably frustrating is, why don't I see people talking about this that actually have an audience? Why? It's unbelievable. Like, there are people I like I watch Tucker, you know, or Hannity. Like, Hannity's guests are really good, and I don't even see them saying this. Thank God for John Solomon, who's on Hannity and going to be on there again tonight. He is an absolute hero. He is getting smeared by the Washington Post. He was actually smeared in the whistleblower's complaint that said that Trump's doing this because he believes Solomon's lies in his report. Completely ostracized by his colleagues in the mainstream media. One person out there reporting actual facts, doing actual journalism. If I'm frustrated, how must he feel? But Solomon can't do what I'm doing. Not because he's not as smart. The guy's probably way smarter than me. But because he wants to keep his reputation as a journalist. Because he's objective. So last night in Hannity's leading him like, would you say this is really corrupt? And Solomon says, it's not my job to give my spin on this. I'm just giving the facts. It's just like IG Horowitz. Remember, the Inspector General Horowitz, so far he's came out with 2 reports. And there's a third one coming out. The first was his investigation into Comey's administration's investigation into the Hillary email scandal. The second was specifically on Comey and his leaks. And the third's going to be about the Russia investigation and the FISA warrants and things like that. 2 of those have came out. The first one that came out was about the Hillary Clinton investigation. Horowitz is a saint. He gets interviewed about it, and he doesn't give his spin. He literally just sticks to the document because he knows he's a professional. His job is not to make decisions. It's not to be like Mueller and say, I don't like the way the media is spinning my report. Horowitz was a professional. So he put the facts out there and he answered questions that were asked. That was it. He did not give his opinion. When you read that report on the Hillary email investigation, it was damning. It is a complete indictment of Comey, of Strzok, of Page, of others at the FBI, and the institution of the FBI in general. It even goes to, he doesn't say, I 100% can prove crimes. He doesn't say that. He just shows how inept or corrupt it all was. He even goes so far as to say he still basically has his suspicions that Peter Strzok's prioritizing of the Russia investigation over the Anthony Weiner laptop was possibly about his admitted bias into hating Trump. That is a damning statement. The central figure in both the Russia and the Hillary investigations may have let that influence how he proceeded at the most crucial time right before the election. Damning. That is a damning indictment of the FBI. Yet no one spoke on it. Me, I'm screaming to myself. I'm like, let me get in front of the guy and ask him questions in Congress. I have way better questions than what most of these Republicans have. Yes, you have your Jim Jordans. There were people that did well. But in 5-minute tidbits, and then the media refuses to cover it. That's how I feel here. Sullivan's got to be thinking to himself, are you kidding me? Did you see the information I just put out? It devastates not only the entire impeachment scandal and how corrupt the media and the Democrats are for pushing it, but it devastates Joe Biden's defense for the actions that he took in having threatened the Ukraine with $1 billion of U.S. tax money to stop the investigation into his son. Devastated with actual documents. I'll put something on Twitter, and thank you guys again. I'll put something up, I get, 2 or 3 likes. I'm like, that's cool. It doesn't have to be me. Maybe someone will see this and they'll make their own video and they can articulate it better than me. But I don't see it. I just don't see it. And then what's even more frustrating is because there's not enough people out there shouting about this, it doesn't even force the mainstream media to take recognition of it. So they just ignore it. They just keep repeating the story as if this evidence doesn't exist. Like I said, if we scream enough, if we share this with enough people, then they'll at least be forced to acknowledge it and come up with some lie why it doesn't matter. But at this point, it's not even in that phase. If you watched my video and saw my tweets 2 days ago, I could barely sleep. I was so excited when I saw Solomon say he had these 450 pages of documents because I've been following Solomon for over 2 years and he's almost always been correct. Almost every single time. And I was like, wow, this is going to be huge. And then he released them. As soon as he released them, I'm sitting there talking to my wife. I see it comes up. I'm like, oh man, I got to go do this video. I got to read all this material and do this video. I do the video. No one really talks about it. So then 3 hours later, he does Hannity. People share the link. That's it. And since then, over 22 hours since he released it. 21, let's be honest. I think 21 hours. I searched for 15 minutes before I did this video. Google, DuckDuckGo, Twitter. I have not seen one Democrat respond to this. One person that was defending Biden. One media company that was defending Biden. Not one of them even acknowledges. Not one. Don't take my word for it. Google it yourself. How is that possible? So let's go through what this Solomon article says, okay? Now, if you watch my video from last night, the last non-live stream video I did, it goes through this entire article. So I'm not going to go through it all again because I know you people love listening to me, but you probably don't want to hear me directly repeat myself. There's several key points that are made here, right? And so I'm just going to summarize at the top. Maybe I will directly go through it. We'll see. But the key points are as follows, and I'll list them in order of importance, I think, to me. 1. The defense attorney and PR firm for Burisma. Now listen, there's a lot of names involved in this. There's a lot of foreign people's names. There's a lot of lawyers' names. There's a lot of Ukrainian company names and things like that. Don't get bogged down in all that crap. There's this company that Joe Biden's son works for. It's called Burisma. That company is owned by a man named Zlochevsky. Zlochevsky is accused of being a corrupt oligarch from the former president that was ousted, named Yanukovych. So all these people want an investigation into Zlochevsky. Biden is the point man in the Ukraine. He's supposed to be outing corruption. In fact, the excuse that Biden gives and everyone's been giving is the reason he threatened to withhold this $1 billion is because corruption was so bad in the Ukraine, even the prosecutors weren't investigating this corrupt oligarch. So Biden wanted Zlochevsky, again, the owner of the company his son was on the board of directors of. He wanted him to be really investigated. That's what we're supposed to believe. Which, whatever. Yeah, Biden was upset the guy wasn't investigating his son hard enough. That's literally the Democrat version here. Do you understand that? Can you imagine if Trump used $1 billion to get a prosecutor looking into his son's company fired and said, oh, no. It wasn't to stop the investigation. I wanted it investigated harder. You think people would believe that? But that's the story we're given. So this company, Burisma, it has these United States lawyers that are defense attorney and public relations people. Here's the biggest bombshell. Okay, and this is what the majority of my video last night was about, but it's only one in here. There's multiple. The biggest bombshell is, once this guy got fired, the former prosecutor named Shokin, a new guy came in. His name was, I'm going to have trouble pronouncing this, but it's like, let me see if I can find it. Boop, 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 boop. Sorry, I had a different part highlighted here. Give me 1 second. I'm really sorry. I know you probably don't care about the names. I don't. Sevruk. So, let's go through it real simple. This corrupt company we're talking about, the company that's being investigated. Shokin's the prosecutor. Biden forces Shokin to be fired. When Shokin gets fired, a new interim prosecutor comes in. His name's Sevruk. Okay? The day that Shokin gets fired, Burisma, this company, again, Hunter Biden's on the board of directors that was being investigated by this prosecutor, their defense lawyers and PR firm contacts the new interim prosecutor and says, we really have to talk to you. A week later, they get to talk to him. That interim prosecutor has a memo, an official memo from the official State Department of the Ukraine that he gave to John Solomon. In that memo, he says, this is what he swore to, that the defense attorneys for Hunter Biden's son's company said, we're sorry that the U.S. officials spread disinformation to get your predecessor fired. We know that he was not corrupt and was actively pursuing this investigation. We're sorry, and we would like to connect you to people in Obama's State Department to kind of flush this all out. Do you get the gravity of that? Now listen, the reason this is so important is as follows. I'm going to get to what Shokin, the prosecutor himself that was fired by Biden, says. But here's the problem. The media and the Democrats and all the people that support them and defend them always demand 100% proof of anything that shows guilt of their people. And they always only want like 1% proof of guilt for anything that shows guilt of Trump or people connected to him. Because they have a horrible double standard. Because they don't care about justice. They're only concerned about defending their team. And so if I say Shokin said this, or this Ukrainian said this, or this person said this, the answer will be to totally ignore what that people said, yep, they're corrupt. Your people are corrupt. And I said, well, wait a minute. The people you're citing, I have proof they were under investigation for corruption. No, they're not. Anyone that investigated them was corrupt. Our people are all objective. They're all great. Your people are all corrupt. Boom. End of story. That's literally before this information came out about Solomon. That's what I was dealing with every day as I debated this with people. Nope. Everyone you say is corrupt. Period. End of story. That's it. So, what's the magnitude of this is as follows. Are they going to claim that the defense attorney that was working in the interest of Biden's son's company is somehow corrupt against Biden's son? Is that their argument? Now we have to believe that basically the defense attorney working for Hunter Biden was corrupt and lying in order to harm the Biden family. It's beyond the pale. That's why no one's answered this allegation. Because they're like, crap. Our normal thing of just screaming corrupt, that person's not trustworthy. Well, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard to argue. I'm sure they're going through that defense attorney's history right now and trying to find anything. Oh, actually, this was a corrupt defense attorney that was working for Burisma. So we can ignore all this. Now, keep in mind what my stance is and what most people's stance are that have a problem with this. I'm not saying, despite the way it looks, that this is 100% proof of the guilt of Joe Biden. But I'm saying it's enough to cast doubt on Biden's explanation, and therefore it warrants an investigation. Period. Biden fired someone, or had someone fired using $1 billion that had a direct benefit to him, a direct implication to him. His son was one of the people being looked at. We should have an investigation into that unless there is 100% proof that that relationship had nothing, the fact his son was being investigated had anything to do with it. Biden gave an explanation. When the guy was corrupt, that's why I did it. That was good enough for the media. That was good enough for the Democrats. His son's own lawyers say, no, he wasn't corrupt. We know he wasn't. Therefore, Biden lied. According to these people who have no incentive whatsoever to smear Biden. They have every incentive to protect him. According to their official statements, Biden lied. Now, take a step back for a second. What would happen if this was Trump? Trump, they are freaking out and demanding impeachment because he didn't even offer a quid pro quo, unlike Biden. And it had nothing to do with an investigation that could personally land his family members in jail for decades. And still they're demanding impeachment. It won't matter that Trump could say, well, I had other reasons. I was actually just trying to investigate 2016 election meddling. Nope, it won't matter. It's proof that it was for his personal gain. That's proof. Impeach him. With Biden, we see there actually was a quid pro quo. There's just as much evidence to suggest that the intent may have been to help himself and his family personally. And unlike with Trump, we know that the explanation that Biden gave was a lie. Donald Trump fired James Comey. Every Democrat at one point said James Comey should be fired because they were pissed at what he did before the election with the Hillary thing. By the way, if you've heard my explanation on this before, Comey actually announced the investigation into Hillary 3 days before the election because he thought he was helping her, even if it did backfire, because he said he assumed she would win, and he didn't want the fact that he refused to reopen the investigation to lead to calls for her impeachment once she was president. So he figured, get it all out of the way, then the people vote, Hillary's president, end of story. We don't have to deal with it ever again. Unfortunately, it didn't work like that way for him. Well, fortunately for the country. Unfortunately for Comey and Hillary. Democrats wanted him fired. Republicans wanted him fired. Rod Rosenstein wrote a memo saying to fire James Comey. James Comey publicly said he was not investigating Donald Trump. Yet, despite all of that, when Donald Trump fired James Comey, we had to have a 2-year investigation into that. Because potentially it could have been Trump firing him for personal reasons, for personal gain. That warranted a 2-year investigation where Trump's lawyers were raided in the middle of the night, where people were put in solitary confinement and pressured to try to squeal on anything about Trump. Now with Biden, the excuse is, yeah, but other people wanted this guy fired, so that was good enough. He was corrupt. Well, that excuse wasn't good enough when Trump fired Comey. And we now know that people were saying he wasn't corrupt. Hunter Biden's company's own defense attorneys. That is devastating. It is devastating to Joe Biden. But don't forget, Biden said in his speech, go back and read his speech on the CFR where he bragged about this. He said, they said, you're not the president. You can't make these decisions. I said, call him. Because Obama signed off on it. Therefore, Obama's entire administration, Obama and Biden are both implicated in this. But it's not just them. The media that's known about this for 3 years, and the Democrats that have known about it for 3 years, and covered it up, and said anyone who investigated this was a conspiracy theorist. But not only that, they're now saying to investigate it is a crime. And therefore, because Trump asked to look into this, he deserves to be impeached. I don't know how to make it any more clear how corrupt this is. This proves the corruption of Biden. It proves that he at least should be investigated. He should be subpoenaed. His calls should be shown. Everything that's happening to Trump except to Biden. That type of investigation. Instead, we're refusing to look at Biden, and to even look at him is a crime. And Trump's going down. The investigations into Trump for looking into the corruption. Are you starting to see why people like me are incredibly concerned with the power of all these people that control these cultural institutions being establishment Democrat? If the shoe was on the other foot and this was the Republicans impeaching because Elizabeth Warren, say, wins in 2020 and she wants to go to the Ukraine and say, hey, we would like evidence. Was there any pressure put on you by Trump? Did he do anything corrupt? We would like evidence of that if you have that. Do you think Elizabeth Warren would be impeached for saying that? If a Republican Congress tried to impeach her for saying that, the media would go nuts. The average person would hear the media going 24/7 about how the Republicans have lost their mind. The Republicans' favorability would be in the single digits. But because the narrative is controlled by all these pro-establishment Democrat groups, this crap flies. It's unbelievable. Now, I'm going to get to more of what this document said, but just allow me to sidetrack for a moment here. Go back and look at my Twitter feed. Go back and look at my videos from earlier in the week, before this came out. The defense that people were giving of this was as follows. Because take the names out of it. Take the name Biden out. Take the name Trump out, right? Just say this. There's an executive branch with a high-level executive in it. And his son worked for a company that was accused of corruption. And so that executive goes to that country and says, I'm going to threaten you with $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor looking into my son's company's corruption. Period. That warrants an investigation. End of story. Republican, Democrat, I don't care. That should be heavily scrutinized. And if Biden was honest with himself, he'd say, yeah, I know. That looks really bad. I understand the investigation. But I'm innocent, so go ahead and investigate. But I understand it looks bad. Trust me, though, it wasn't bad. It's that simple. Any objective person would say, yes, that looks incredibly shady. It should be investigated. Regardless of Christine Lagarde from the IMF also wanted that prosecutor fired. Irrelevant. So did the Atlantic Council, a bunch of other Obama allies. Irrelevant. There should be an investigation. Period. There wasn't one. Because the people that should have been investigating, the Democrats and the media that were defending Biden, made two excuses for him. And I heard these same two excuses. That story I just told you there, that any objective person would say, wow, that warrants an investigation. I was told no investigation needed. And if you think there is, you're a nut. You got Trump derangements. You're a Trump tard. You're a moron. Oh, what a conspiracy theory. You know, some of the people would send me the picture of Alice Jones with the tinfoil hat. That's the quality of the responses I get to this. That's what these people are saying. And they said, you're nuts for wanting this investigation. And it's so obvious that you're nuts. And let me tell you why. There's two clear reasons. Right? Number one, the investigation in Biden's son's company was stopped anyways. It was done. And number two, even still, aside from that, that prosecutor was corrupt and everyone knew it. That's why Biden wanted him fired. Now let's go to number 2 for a second. I said that's irrelevant. Even if he was corrupt, let's concede that he was corrupt. And let's concede that a bunch of people were saying fire him. That doesn't matter. That's the exact same situation with Comey being fired. Was that enough? Could we have said, wait a minute, there's no need for Mueller. Everybody wanted this guy fired. And you'd say, so what? The reason Trump wanted him out was because he was worried that Comey was going to investigate him. No, that doesn't matter. All these other people wanted him fired, right? It's the same thing. The Democrats would have never accepted that. They would have said, no, that's irrelevant. The same situation here. It could be true that he was corrupt. It could be true that a bunch of people wanted him fired. But it's still the onus is on Joe Biden that there has to be an investigation to prove, because this guy was investigating his son, that it wasn't unethical for him to do this. If Biden was innocent, he would have welcomed the investigation. And this is further proof to my claim that this is tantamount to election interference. Because the reason Biden couldn't welcome that investigation is, one, because his son's probably guilty, and second, because it would look bad and harm them in the election. Remember, when Trump was accused of paying off the extortionist Stormy Daniels, right? Remember he got accused of paying off that extortionist? And they said, oh, that's a campaign contribution. That's illegal campaign finance. Because he did that in order to bury the story to help him in the 2016 election. That's what they said, remember? They said that he used that to bury that story to increase his chances in the election. So that proves the Democrats said that burying a story could also be for the benefit of the election. So if a foreign group is burying the story to benefit Biden's team in the election, that is, what again? Foreign interference and meddling into our elections. Which is exactly what we were told for 3 years was the biggest deal ever that we need to investigate. Only it's a crime to investigate foreign interference if it helped the Democrats. That's a crime. You're impeached if you do that. You could do anything you want to investigate foreign interference if it helped Trump. But anything that helped the Democrats, it's a crime to look into. That's what they'd have you believe. And remember what we were told about Trump. Well, okay, you're right. They didn't verify the information for the FISA warrant. And you're right that things look really bad. And you're right, it was bad that the Steele dossier was paid for by Hillary and was used as a reason to spy on Trump people. But we had to do it because the allegation was so serious that we just had to do it. Because election interference, if a foreign country was interfering to help one side win the election, that's incredible. It's so serious. Oh, okay, well, here's the exact situation with Ukraine helping the Democrats. How dare you look into that? That's a crime. How can anyone take these people seriously? So like I said with the story, so we know that is potential burying of a story for election interference. That's what they said about Stormy Daniels. Burying a story is for the benefit of the election. So that would be the same with Biden here. So it's irrelevant if other people said to fire him. But I digress. That was the argument I was making. People didn't care about my argument. Again, remember the two defenses of why it was okay to not have an investigation into Biden. Not even a journalistic investigation, let alone a real investigation by actual officials in the government. Number one, because the investigation to the Sun was shut down. The Sun's company was shut down already. Number two, because the guy was corrupt and everyone wanted him fired anyways. That was repeated verbatim to me. Over and over and over again every time I said this. Now we have proof. That Biden's company's own defense attorney and PR people said that that the case was still ongoing. That's the first thing this entire Solomon piece shows. As I've been saying and proving using other sources, but clearly, if the case was shut down, one, the evidence admits that it wasn't shut down until 2017. That was well after Biden forced the firing in 2016 of this prosecutor. So that's a lie. People repeated that. The media repeated that. That is a lie. That is 100% proven. That claim is done. The media lied about that. 50% of their defense of why we shouldn't investigate Biden out the window. Like that. Lied. But trust them on the rest, right? Trust them on the rest. Well, you're a conspiracy theorist if you want this looked into. Yes, they lied about 50% already. But okay, moving on. Number two, it shows that Hunter Biden's company, Burisma's own defense and PR people said that actually Shokin, that prosecutor, was not corrupt. and that he was actively looking into Burisma, and that they apologized that people, U.S. officials, spread disinformation to get that person fired. That's what people defending Hunter Biden's interests said. Testified to a week after that prosecutor was fired. That proves that the two defenses of this story that were given by the media, that were given by everyone on Twitter, everyone that was discussing it with me, are lies. They are wrong. And so, you would think, if you made fun of me, or you made fun of people like me, or you made fun of all the people out there that are Trump supporters, or you made fun of people that don't even like Trump but said, wow, this looks bad for Biden, and you said, you're a conspiracy theorist if you believe that, because of these two reasons, you were wrong. And where are you today? The only response I've got from people is to post the Intercept article and the Washington Post article from last week that I already debunked. That doesn't take into account any of the evidence we learned today, the actual proof of the documents that Solomon provided. Because this isn't just Solomon saying, I've read documents, but you can't see them. He provides the documents. That's devastating. And not one media outlet, not one Democrat. Look it up. Go to Google. Look it up to see if anyone's talking about this. Has anyone who made these arguments, the Washington Post, PolitiFact, the New York Times, the Intercept, have any of them responded to these documents that Solomon released? It's been 21 and a half hours now. Has one person responded? No one. Not one person. What did they say about Trump? What was their defense of using unverified evidence paid for by Hillary Clinton's camp, sourced by Kremlin officials to spy on Trump associates? What was their excuse? The allegation was so serious that we had to do it. Now we have the exact same allegation. Election interference by a foreign country. Even more devastating. We know there was a quid pro quo of $1 billion involved. We know that it directly affected Joe Biden's son. And silence. They give two lame excuses, and when those lame excuses are shut down, they just ignore it. Everyone, find a media article. Find one. I'd be happy to debunk it. Yet where are every single Republican? I mean, there are good people. You got Bongino. He's good. You know? Mark Levin maybe was talking about this. I don't know. Shapiro and them aren't. The regular people on Fox aren't. Easily, 98% of Americans haven't heard this information. Of course, 50% of them could care less anyways. They haven't even been paying attention to any, which I don't blame them. You're working a 9 to 5. You don't have time to follow all this insanity. But the people that were invested in this story, the overwhelming majority of them, have no idea that this material is out there. Why? Where are the Republicans? Where is Lindsey Graham? Where are Trump's people? Don Jr. and Giuliani should be in front of a press conference right now, reading this Solomon article over and over and over again, and all the documents attached to it. The allegation's serious, right? Everyone admit the allegation's serious. Yes, I will provide, here's the Solomon article, and you'll see there are hyperlinks. So when it says the memo, now I will warn you, I can't remember where I found the translated copy. I didn't see, let me finish what I'm saying to Field. There are hyperlinks on that Solomon article to where it says the memo. Now, the memo from Sevruk, the interim prosecutors in Ukraine, but you could use a translate program. It's like on Scribd, though. And the rest of the documents that he links, they're all hyperlinks to them as well. Tom, if you could link the WAPO or the NBC article that references Solomon's documents that he released here, I would love to, see that. Washington Post is under a paywall for me, but I'll do what I can to find it. I haven't seen one outlet. For 15 minutes before I came on and did this, I looked. Didn't see one outlet referencing these statements. These documents. Not one. Why is it being ignored? Just like the letter, if you tuned into the first half of this live stream, the letter that the 3 senators sent. Absolutely ignored except by a CNN fact checker, which I went through and thoroughly debunked how stupid it was. They just ignore. So that's part 1 of what this Solomon article says. Part 2. In fact, let me bear with me for a second here. Let me shrink my fat head. Whoop. All right. Window capture on. Let's see if this works. Nope. Okay. This is Viktor Shokin. I won't be able to see your comments for a minute because I'm showing this. The prosecutor that got fired's name was Shokin. Okay? Let's see what Solomon says. Solomon says in his article that Shokin, in his sworn affidavit, this affidavit's from September 4th of this year, says that the reason he was fired, he was told by the president at the time, a man by the name of Poroshenko, that he was fired because Joe Biden wanted him to stop looking into his son's company. Let me repeat that. The prosecutor is testifying that the president of the Ukraine told him that, I'm sorry, you're fired. Joe Biden wants this investigation stopped, and you should step down and consider it a gift to your country because $1 billion is on the line. Now, people will say, but Shokin was corrupt. I want you to think of this for a second. If under any circumstances, I don't care if the whole world was saying, if there is a prosecutor that is looking in to someone in Donald Trump's family, and Donald Trump pressures for that prosecutor to be fired, and let's say that everyone at NBC said this prosecutor was corrupt, and everyone at CNN said he was corrupt, and at the New York Times said he was corrupt, and every Democrat said they were corrupt before Trump fired them, and only once this prosecutor was looking into Trump's son did Trump fire him. Do you think that would be a good enough excuse to say, well, that prosecutor was corrupt anyways? Do you think that would be good enough for the Dems? Do you think that'd be good enough for the media? Well, who cares what that prosecutor says? They're a liar. They're corrupt. So skip over anything they said. They would be batting down the door of this prosecutor to get statements. But that's the only defense you'll see here. People, everything I'm about to read to you, right? This is let me give you CNN's answer. Let me give you the Democrats' answers. Shokin's corrupt, so we can't believe anything he says. Thank you. They're not even going to look into it. He's swearing under penalty of law that this is true. Where's Biden's documents? Where's Biden's proof? Let's see Biden's call transcripts involving the Ukraine. Let's interview the former President Poroshenko and see what he says. I'm going to switch over just real quick to make sure my stream's still going. Okay. This is Viktor Shokin's sworn affidavit. You can see it here. Follow along with me. Witness statement of Viktor Milokovich Shokin. I, Viktor Shokin, holding passport of Ukrainian citizen, issued blah, blah, blah. I make this statement at the request of lawyers acting for Dmitry Firtash for use in legal proceedings in Austria. I do so entirely voluntarily without any threat or inducement. I am a former general prosecutor of the Republic of the Ukraine. Just, again, because it's confusing, there's a lot of names. This is the guy that Biden wanted fired, okay? Just so we're clear on this. This is his sworn affidavit. I worked in the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine from May 1980 to April 3rd, 2016, at different times. I was Deputy Prosecutor of Ukraine on 3 separate occasions, from 2002 to 2003, 2005 to 2007, and 14 to 15. I was General Prosecutor of Ukraine from February 10th, 2015 to April 3rd, 2016. I was dismissed from the position of General Prosecutor in circumstances that I set out below. In this witness statement, I explained during the period in which I worked as General Prosecutor of Ukraine. A. DF, remember, DF is Dmitry Firtash. That's the lawyers that requested this, that guy's lawyers. Fortes announced publicly that he would return to the Ukraine to address the employees of the Ukraine on December 2nd, 2015 to launch his plan for the modernization of Ukraine. B. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, who represented the U.S. in its relations with Ukraine, together with Poroshenko and others in Ukraine, such as the Minister of Internal Affairs Akov, took steps aimed at preventing DF's return to the Ukraine. They resorted to extreme and desperate measures to do this. Indeed, I found out from speeches given by the Minister of Internal Affairs Akov, which were published in the media, that internal affairs authorities had been investigating 3 criminal cases, under which criminal charges could have been brought against DF. The media went on to report that if DF returned to the Ukraine, he could have been detained and arrested. However, this was merely a pretext to take further action aimed at stopping DF from coming to the Ukraine. 2. Akov stated in the media that DF would be arrested and prosecuted in Ukraine on U.S. charges, that this was allegedly possible under Ukrainian law, and the U.S. state officials at the time had requested this action. 3. However, I could testify as general prosecutor I did not receive any evidence or material from anyone to support DF's involvement in criminality. So in other words, he's already alleging that Joe Biden, amongst other people in the Ukrainian government, are trying to get this person to keep him from coming back to the Ukraine and accusing him of criminality and putting pressure on him even though he had no evidence of this criminality. 4. It transpired that the actions above did not deter DF from returning, and so the Ukrainian government organized and endorsed a unit of ultra-right militia of the Azov battalion to threaten DF by posting pictures of military-clad and armored members of the unit, wearing masks and patrolling the airport waiting for him to arrive. 5. In addition, the media also reported the Ukraine had closed its airspace to private jets. Now again, this isn't getting to the meat of what we're talking about, but I'm reading this all to show this isn't just him coming out because he's attacking Biden. This is a sworn affidavit in an ongoing case that someone's defense attorneys wanted this information, and he's testifying to this. You can already see how he's mentioning Biden's involvement in this case, but we'll get specifically to why he was fired coming up. C. It's clear to me that certain U.S. officials from President Obama's administration, in particular the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, directly manipulated the political leadership of Ukraine on false pretexts in order to prevent DF from returning to Ukraine, as they were so concerned about him reestablishing public life there. D. DF did not travel to Ukraine. Vice President Joe Biden did, where he met with President Poroshenko on December 6th to address the Rada on December 8th. E. If the U.S. presidential administration had indeed wanted to prosecute DF, the correct legal procedure should have been followed. DF should have been subjected to official procedure of criminal prosecution upon his arrival in Ukraine on the basis of materials officially provided by the USA, and a detailed analysis of all the evidence and relevant legal positions in full compliance with Ukrainian law. Now again, I just think it's worth pointing out here, he's alleging criminal actions by the Obama administration and Biden, that they were seeking to get Ukrainian officials and prosecutors to punish someone in ways that weren't law-abiding. So when people say, well, you can't listen to Shokin, he's corrupt, Shokin's saying that the Obama administration was corrupt. So why can we believe the Obama administration? Again, at best, if you say it's a wash and either side could have been a corrupt, why not an investigation then? Continuing, in the absence of sufficient evidence, he would have either been acquitted in the criminal proceedings or would have been terminated. Consequently, all allegations against him would have been cleared. However, instead of this, state officials from the U.S. presidential administration, who had substantial influence on the entire law enforcement system of the Ukraine, my own dismissal being evidence of such influence, see below, did not take any actions in regards to bringing criminal charges against DF in the Ukraine. Therefore, I believe that having realized that they could not mount a substantial prosecution in Ukraine, and following their recent loss in the respect of the extradition case in Austria, they took active steps in order to block his return. Had DF arrived in the Ukraine, there was a real possibility of attempt of being made on his life, whether on orders or unilaterally by an extremist serving his countries. And I hereby confirm that as general prosecutor, I never would have permitted DF to be detained for political reasons, especially as I know for a fact that there are no criminal grounds to detain and prosecute him. Do you see this? Just like I was saying in my other, that we see evidence of case after case of the corrupt officials in the Ukraine, particularly at the NABU, which was the agency that got the investigation into Biden's son after this gentleman was fired, of being corrupt and being under the thumb of the Obama administration. which would make sense because we were told by the Obama administration and all these people that thought that this guy said that he was corrupt. The reason he was corrupt was because he didn't prosecute Zlochevsky. Well, okay, then it went to supposedly the people that all these people liked, Obama administration liked, yet Zlochevsky still wasn't prosecuted. And it was only when it went to the good guys, according to Obama and Biden, that the investigation was finally buried. Isn't that odd? Moving on, G. This instance of interference in Ukraine's affairs by U.S. officials to achieve U.S. objectives, barring DF's return to public life in Ukraine, was closely followed by another instance of interference, namely forcing Poroshenko to dismiss me because my actions as general prosecutor did not suit the interest of the U.S. vice president and the persons connected to him. Do you hear that? Let me go back and check, make sure my live stream's still going. Do you get the implications of what this is saying? The prosecutor that was fired said he was directly told by the president of the Ukraine that he had to be let go because Vice President Biden didn't want him investigating his son. I now set out the details. 5. The general prosecutor of Ukraine is appointed to office by the president of the Ukraine with the consent of Verovna Rada, i.e. the parliament. They call it the Rada over there. I was accordingly appointed during the presidency of Poroshenko by 318 votes of members of the Ukrainian parliament. Remember, this guy had worked for the prosecutorial office in Ukraine since 1980. 318 members of parliament voted to have him in there, which constituted a constitutional majority. While occupying this post, I was staunchly politically unaffiliated. The circumstances of my dismissal were that I tendered my resignation to the Rada, again, their parliament, at the request of the president. Poroshenko asked me to resign due to pressure from U.S. presidential administration, in particular Joe Biden, who was the U.S. vice president. Biden was threatening to withhold $1 billion US in subsidies to the Ukraine until I was removed from office. After I yielded to the president's request and submitted my voluntary resignation, Poroshenko commented about it in the media. He said that I had carried out a colossal amount of work as general prosecutor, which is something none of my predecessors have been able to do, especially with regards to my work on reforming the different bodies of the prosecutor's office, on creating the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, which enabled the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, the NABU, that's the agency that's corrupt that Obama was influenced, to conduct legal work, and on creating self-government prosecution authorities. The official reason put forward for my dismissal was that I had allegedly failed to secure the public's trust. Poroshenko and other state officials, including representatives of the U.S. presidential administration, had never previously had any complaints about my work, however. There were no grievances against me or any allegations that I had committed any corruption-related or indeed any other criminal offenses. Biden never stated anything of the kind either. Furthermore, all sanctions in respect of Yanukovych, that was the former president that was ousted that they're saying was corrupt, and his supporters remained in force and were not lifted whilst I occupied the post. Moreover, these sanctions were extended. In other words, he's saying this former president was accused of being corrupt. What we're being told was Shokin was let go because he wasn't prosecuting the former president's corrupt friends. He's saying not only did I uphold all sanctions against the former president's corrupt friends, they remained in there until the day I was forced out of office. And he extended them. The truth is that I was forced out because I was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into Burisma Holdings, a natural gas firm active in Ukraine, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was a member of the board of directors. I assume Burisma, which was connected with gas extraction, had the support of U.S. Vice President Joe Biden because his son was on the board of directors. On several occasions, President Poroshenko asked me to have a look at the criminal case against Burisma and consider the possibility of winding down the investigative actions in respect of this company, but I refused to close the investigation. Therefore, I was forced to leave office under direct and intense pressure from Joe Biden and the U.S. administration. That's mind-blowing. Do you understand the implications of what this guy's saying? He was directly fired because he was doing his job and looking into Joe Biden's son. And Joe Biden had direct and intense pressure to the president of the Ukraine to get rid of this guy for investigating his son. That's devastating. Why isn't this guy in front of the U.S. Congress right now today? There's no explanation. Why aren't media people out there trying to reach out to him? They don't care. They've ignored the entire statement. Not one comment in 24 hours. The prosecutor that was fired is saying the president told him he had to stop the investigation into Joe Biden's son. And that he had to resign because Joe Biden was putting pressure to withhold $1 billion in order to stop the investigation into his son. This is backed up by other things. 1, Joe Biden's own statements where he admits to pressuring with $1 billion. 2, the fact that we know that this case was eventually killed after this prosecutor was gone. Again, remember, the official statement from the Biden defenders is as follows. Biden demanded Shokin be fired because he was not investigating Burisma and Zlochevsky, the corrupt oligarch that owned it, hard enough. In other words, Biden wanted this guy fired for not investigating his son's company hard enough. That's what we were told. It makes no sense on face value, but that's what we were told. We know that if that's the case, why wasn't Biden and the Obama administration furious? Why weren't they speaking out publicly when the investigations were shut down by the agency that ended up getting it in the Ukraine? So think of it this way. Take Biden's son out of it. Just, you're a U.S. official. You're upset because you think there are these corrupt people that the country of Ukraine isn't prosecuting. So you demand the firing of the head prosecutor. Then you give $1 billion, only to find out that the next prosecutors also are corrupt and not investigating that person. Wouldn't you be furious? Wouldn't you be demanding the $1 billion back? Wouldn't you be in the press talking about how corrupt this was? But no, they didn't do any of that. Conveniently, the investigation into Joe Biden's son's company disappeared. And strangely enough, we were told originally Biden was upset that that company wasn't being investigated hard enough. And strangely enough, he didn't have a worry once the investigation was dropped by the other agency. That's the story. That's the official story that we're told. Now we know that the prosecutor's saying, I was told by the president of my own country that Joe Biden, I had to take a hit for the team. I had to resign because $1 billion in aid to our country that desperately needed it were at stake. And so for the good of the country, I had to step down because my ethics would not allow me to drop the investigation into Joe Biden's son. Continuing. In my conversations with Poroshenko at the time, he was emphatic that I should cease my investigations regarding Burisma. When I did not, he said the U.S., via Biden, was refusing to release $1 billion in U.S. aid promised to the Ukraine. He said he had no choice, therefore, but to ask me to resign. When Poroshenko asked me to resign, the way that he put it to me that he was making it for the good of the country and that I should agree, also as an act of patriotism, I agreed to tender my resignation on this basis. Now, full stop here for a minute. One of the things that people were saying, remember, the Ukrainian minister, the Ukrainian president, have both came out and said, I didn't feel that the conversation between Trump and the Ukrainian president had any pressure whatsoever. And what is the media and the Democrats' take on this? Well, of course, because Trump's like a mafioso and they're scared to upset Trump. Therefore, they'll change their story to benefit him. By the same token, we know that Joe Biden threatened $1 billion if they didn't listen to him. So you don't think that the president at the time, Poroshenko, would have went along to get along with what Biden wanted and wouldn't have spoke up and said how corrupt it was? He didn't want to risk $1 billion. Why is that excuse? So we could say, oh, well, clearly that's why the Ukraine's lying now about Trump. But when it came to actually withholding $1 billion that we have proof of from the Biden and Obama administration, no one bats an eye and says, geez, maybe the Ukraine was scared shitless then. And that's why they just didn't speak up. Number 10. When Poroshenko asked me to resign, I already read that. He tendered his resignation. 11. After my dismissal, Joe Biden made a public statement saying, even bragging, that he had fired me. This is when it became clear that the real reason for my dismissal was my actions regarding Burisma and Biden's personal interest in that company, which was demonstrated by the following. A. It was Biden's order and wish that I be removed from office, not Poroshenko's decision. We know that's true because remember Biden's statement, he said, I had been talking to them about getting this prosecutor fired. Then I personally showed up to Kiev and talked to the Ukrainians. I said, why isn't this guy fired yet? They said, well, and I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. You're not going to get the money if he's not fired. They said, you're not the president. I said, call him. And you know what? They fired the son of a bitch. That's Biden's statement. So Biden admits in his statement that they didn't want to fire him. It was only after Biden made the final threat, I'm leaving in 6 hours, you aren't getting the money. At first they bickered with him. You're not the president. We don't have to listen to you. Call him. If it had nothing to do with Biden's threat, Biden would have said, I wanted you to fire this guy Shokin, and Poroshenko would have said, yeah, I am firing him. No problem. I was going to do that regardless. Instead, he said, we don't have to listen to you. And Biden said, oh, yeah, you do. And they said, oh, sorry. Okay, we'll fire him. So, yes, that's backed up. It wasn't Poroshenko's decision. It was Biden's decision. So if it was so obvious that Shokin was corrupt, why wouldn't the non-corrupt, we're led to believe by Biden and the Obama administration, President Poroshenko, want the corrupt prosecutor fired? If it was knowledge that he was so corrupt. Remember, the allegation of corruption against Shokin was as follows. You have to understand the situation was going on in the Ukraine. And I know this is complicated, but just hear me out. You had this president, Yanukovych. He was kind of a pro-Russian president. And then you had this rebellion that occurred in the Ukraine. As a result of the rebellion, a president that was in direct opposition to Yanukovych came forward. That's Poroshenko. So you had this guy, Ukrainian president, that was favorable to Russia. Then you have a big insurrection. This guy's ousted. New president put in that's against that guy. He's not favorable towards Russia. He's more favorable to the United States. Okay? What incentive would this new president that's interested in getting rid of all the corrupt people that were under the past administration, if he knew his prosecutor was allowing these corrupt people to escape, why wouldn't he have fired him before Joe Biden said anything? Why would he have defended him to Joe Biden? And said, we don't have to listen to you. You're not the president. Only after the threat of $1 billion. So it adds up with Shokin's story. B, the reason was because it was precisely the state officials from the U.S. administration of President Obama and Joe Biden in particular who were telling the heads of the Ukraine law enforcement system how to investigate and whom to investigate, including members of the Yanukovych regime team. I was not complying with their will in respect to Zlochevsky. Zlochevsky, again, is the guy who owns Burisma, who is the company that Hunter Biden's on the board of directors. In particular, who was a minister under Yanukovych, so I had to be removed from office. Now, again, look at what this statement's saying. Go watch my videos I've been doing all week. Evidence that there were investigations. Remember, Joe Biden gets this prosecutor fired. Then there's an interim prosecutor named Sevruk. Sakharov's the entire first part of this statement, where where Hunter Biden's company's defense lawyers talked to the interim prosecutor. That was this Sevruk guy. Sakharov's own memos show that Hunter Biden's defense attorneys say, we know Shokin wasn't corrupt. We know that. We know that he was actively investigating us. We want to talk to you. We want to get you to talk to the State Department to kind of smooth this all out. To the new prosecutor. Then ultimately that prosecutor who was on the interim loses the case. And it goes to this NABU, which is kind of like the FBI of the Ukraine. But the new prosecutor that was put in was a man by the name of Lutsenko. Lutsenko, Joe Biden admits at the end of his diatribe where he admits to all of this, he says, we got a new prosecutor put in and he was solid at the time. In other words, Lutsenko was a good guy. Lutsenko admits publicly that there were investigations into organizations in the Ukraine that were getting improper money from the United States Obama administration. Obama's ambassador went directly to this prosecutor, Lutsenko, and said, you cannot prosecute the following people because of U.S. interests. The media has written this off because Lutsenko said that he was given a list of who not to prosecute. Lutsenko then later gets interviewed and says, okay, I wasn't directly given a list. Here's what happened. The ambassador came and said, you can't prosecute this person, you can't prosecute this person. Lutsenko gets frustrated and says, do you want to just make me a list of the people I can't prosecute? And the ambassador says no. According to the Washington Post, that proves Lutsenko lied. What garbage. No, it doesn't. He just says, okay, technically I wasn't handed a list, but I was told people that I couldn't prosecute. So that's further proof of this statement that backs up what Shokin's saying. That the Obama administration had its fingers in all of these prosecutions. They were influencing the prosecutors. None of them got fired, right? It was only Shokin that got fired. So his story of I was the one guy that wasn't listening to Obama and the Obama administration wanted me fired, geez, that starts to really add up, doesn't it? C. It was not Poroshenko being patriotic. It was Poroshenko submitting to the demands of state officials from the U.S. administration of President Obama for the reasons of political economy and the personal interest of the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, amongst others. It was to benefit them politically going into the 2016 election. It was to benefit Joe Biden personally. How is this not mainstream news on every single channel right now? Shokin's corrupt. That's what they'll say. Oh, Shokin's corrupt. We can't believe anything he says. He's corrupt. Even though I'm giving you all the background evidence that backs up what he's saying. When I found out the actual reason for my dismissal from Biden's statement, I went to the courts and asked for recognition that I had been forced to submit my voluntary resignation and therefore that my dismissal be declared unlawful. I was refused to have my case examined on its merits due to the fact that I had supposedly missed the deadlines for applying to the courts. When I exhausted all domestic legal remedies, I petitioned the ECTHR, which I have no idea what that is, on the basis of my fundamental rights and been breached, and by my dismissal was politically motivated and unlawful. DF won his extradition case in Austria. And that's basically it, involving Biden demanding he be fired. Devastating. Absolutely devastating. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It defies belief. I don't hear anyone. I mean, tell me. I have 4 people watching right now. Can any of you tell me? Do you hear this on the news anywhere? Do you hear other people on YouTube going through this material? Hours upon hours I've spent in this, and it's just like, no one listens. They just keep reciting the same talking points that this proves are debunked. Let me give the devil's advocate case. Let me give the best case to answer this, right? That I could come up with. Let me put my fat head back up here again. Yep. I'm balding, isn't it? And I got gray chin hairs. These stories are making me more gray. Though I absolutely love trying to end this corruption and talking about this stuff. But have you seen other YouTubers talking about this? Have you seen other people post articles, that's it. But to actually go through and read the material is amazing. So here's the devil's advocate position, right? On this Shokin thing. Shokin is a corrupt liar. He has every incentive to try to clear his name. Right? Shokin is a terrible, terrible, corrupt liar. Christine Lagarde from the International Monetary Fund wanted him fired. A bunch of people in the UK's intelligence community and political community wanted him fired. A bunch of people in the EU wanted him fired. So we shouldn't take a word of what he says as truthful. Okay? That's the devil's advocate position. Now I want you to try to be as objective as possible. If you're listening to this, you're probably a Trump supporter. In that we have allegations, such a serious allegation, and we have both sides saying the other side's corrupt, wouldn't the prudent thing to do be to have an investigation? Not to declare Biden guilty, not to declare Hunter Biden guilty, right? But to have an investigation. To personally have U.S. investigative bodies, if you're the government, U.S. investigative bodies sit down and interview the relevant people. Try to interview Shokin. Try to interview Poroshenko. Try to interview Biden. To subpoena documents of all these people. Does Shokin have documents showing that he filed an appeal to his case, as he said? Does Biden have documents showing him talking to Poroshenko? Does Poroshenko have documents? Do what you can to investigate this, right? Don't say Biden's guilty, but you have an investigation. If you're a governmental body, if you're a journalistic body, you go out, you interview Shokin, you interview Poroshenko, you interview Hunter Biden, you interview the lawyers of the Burisma, you interview Zlochevsky. All of these people as a journalist you would be reaching out to, right? They're not doing any of that. John Solomon's doing that. That's it. Now, the implications of this true. Take out the name Joe Biden. A vice president used $1 billion US to get his son out of legal trouble when his son was potentially looking at decades in prison. That is quite possibly the biggest story in the history of this country as far as a political story of political corruption. I contend that the biggest political scandal in the history of this country was the Russia hoax. This is right up there. And yet we have one journalist that looked into it. One. The Ukraine willfully gave him these documents. It wasn't even that hard. So if you're a journalist, what's your excuse? And now, once the evidence out there, wouldn't you be like, holy crap, I missed this. Boy, do I look like a fool. I've just been telling everyone they're a conspiracy theorist, that there's nothing to this story. Now these documents come out. So you would either, one, say, wow, I was wrong and admit it and then further investigate. Or two, you would say, no, this doesn't prove anything and here's why. You wouldn't not say anything for over 24 hours. And trust me, they won't say anything unless we, the people, start screaming about this loud enough. And it gets into, someone who has more than 5 people watching them. But until then, they won't say anything. And then they'll wait until they get their talking points. And they'll all say the same thing. They won't do any independent investigating. Now, if you're the governmental body, which is more important than the journalist body to investigate this, you think you'd be reaching out and trying to get evidence and things like that, right? Well, I have a surprise for you. I have news for you. That's what an objective person would think, right? I think we could all agree that's what an objective person would do. Want to investigate this. According to the Democrats and to the media, that's a crime. You trying to investigate this corruption is itself the corruption. Not the actual corruption. Not the fact that the Ukraine's been trying to give us this evidence for a year and a half. Nope. The fact that you want to look at the evidence means you're the corrupt one. Read the book, 1984. 2 + 2 = 5. What they're talking about, war is peace, right? Truth is the lie. If you go through the scene, I can't remember, it's been so long since I read 1984, but they got the protagonist and they put this rat in a cage because he has a fear of rats and it's going to eat his face. And they keep saying, what's 2 + 2? What's 2 + 2? What's 2 + 2? And he's like, 4. No, then they torture him. Nah, it's at 5. They keep torturing him. And finally, the answer he gives is, what do you want 2 + 2 to be? That's the right answer. That's what we're seeing here. They have perverted. They have so much control over the narrative that they're literally saying the act of investigating corruption is corruption. The truth is a lie. That's what they're saying. You don't think if they're willing to say, remember, go check my video I did. I was laughed at during the Kavanaugh thing originally when I said the Democrats are becoming the party of ending the concept of innocent until proven guilty. The cornerstone principle of our entire legal system and country. This country is the greatest country in the history of the world because it was founded on the principles of the individual, of personal liberty and freedom. You can do whatever you want until you harm other people. That was the idea. That encouraged all sorts of innovation and personal pride and personal freedom and personal liberty and personal responsibility. That's what made this country great. The legal extrapolation of that is the idea of innocent until proven guilty. The Democrats seek to end that. They said Kavanaugh was guilty based on her truth, Christine Blasey Ford's truth, not the truth. And this is a postmodern trope. There is no such thing as truth, right? If you study postmodernism, there's no objective truth. There's only subjective truth. So that there is no the truth. There is your truth. And that's what they're saying. And because of that, Christine Blasey Ford's truth was all that mattered. The facts didn't matter, only her truth. Therefore, and they specifically said this, leaders of the Democratic Party said it is up to Kavanaugh to prove that he's innocent. That was insane. I spoke up. I was laughed at by most people. Oh, please, you're being hyperbolic. They're now saying that it is guilty to investigate their corruption. You have to prove that you're innocent. You are guilty for wanting to investigate us, of trying to do this for personal gain. You have to prove that you didn't do it for personal gain. Now, when Joe Biden used $1 billion to, admittedly in a quid pro quo, to extort the Ukraine, he was 100% innocent. Until you could prove him 100% guilty, then we have to default to innocent. When Donald Trump wants to investigate those crimes, he is 100% guilty and has to prove that he's innocent. Do you see the insanity here? And no one listens. Where are the Republicans? Where are Trump's people going through this material? Why isn't there a press conference going on right now? The third thing that... An hour and 50 minutes I've been going. I'm not even finished. The third thing that this Solomon article says is that the defense attorneys, remember, go back. For those of you, I don't know who's been here the whole time or if people have switched. The first point, there were 3 points on the Solomon argument. The first was Hunter Biden's company Burisma's, their American defense attorney and PR people specifically told the interim Ukrainian prosecutor a week after Shokin was fired. 1 week after. They contacted the prosecutor the day Shokin was fired. But they couldn't get in to meet with him until a week after. Flew to Kiev, met with the interim prosecutor. That interim prosecutor's own notes say that the lawyers that were representing the interest of Joe Biden's son said, we know that the U.S. officials that said your predecessor was corrupt were spreading disinformation. He was not corrupt. He was a great civil servant that was actually actively looking into our company. But we would like to clear the air with you. It's important that this investigation be closed. We want you to work with the U.S. State Department to answer any questions you may have. Bombshell number 1, that Biden lied when he said I fired him for corruption. That's a lie, according to people that have no reason to smear Biden. In fact, quite the opposite. They had his son's company's interest at heart, and they said that. Number 2, Shokin himself, the prosecutor, shows that he was fired because he was actively investigating Joe Biden's son. Now, the number 3 implication of this is that these defense attorneys and the PR firms were actively working with people in the Obama State Department to facilitate meetings involving the investigation of Burisma. Now, do you understand why that's important? Why would officials in the United States be facilitating, helping out what they called a corrupt oligarch in working out deals with Ukrainian prosecutors? Why would they be doing that? Doesn't this fit in with exactly what Shokin's saying in his statement? Which is exactly what the videos I did previously, showing incident after incident of the Obama State Department influencing prosecutors in the Ukraine to drop cases that they wanted. Now they're helping Burisma. Keep in mind, if we're to believe the defense of Joe Biden, all the people that are defending Joe Biden thinks that all of these leftover oligarchs from Yanukovych, from that president, when that president was outed, they were all of these corrupt Ukrainians. And Biden's pissed and won't give $1 billion because the prosecutor, Shokin, wasn't investigating these corrupt Ukrainians from that administration. And so he gets that prosecutor fired. And then people in Obama's administration start working with that very corrupt prosecutor's company to facilitate working out deals with the new prosecutor. And this isn't guesswork. This is proven. Let me get to it. guess I'll bring it back up. Why not? Shrinking my fat head again. Whoop! Okay. To the article. Burisma's own accounting records. Their records, right? Not shady Ukrainians. Or, I'm sorry, Burisma is the company. I'm sorry. Burisma's own accounting records show that it paid tens of thousands of dollars to Hunter Biden. Remember, that's also backed up by a U.S. investigation as well. That Biden was getting up to $50,000. Hunter Biden was getting up to $50,000 a month. To serve on the board of the American lobbying firm and public relations firm, Blue Star Strategies. I'm sorry. Let me recount. I'm getting confused. Yes, he was getting money from Burisma. But what this is saying is their records also show that Hunter Biden was on this public relations firm called Blue Star Strategies. That's ran by Sally Painter and Karen Tramontano, both who served under Bill Clinton's administration. Don't get confused by all these names. There's this public relations company. We know that Hunter Biden was working with Burisma and was working with this public relations company. Okay? Joe Biden's son. He's involved in both these companies. These women, Sally Painter and Karen Tramontano, are also, who worked for Bill Clinton, they're the ones running that company. Okay. Got it so far. Days before Biden forced Shokin's firing, Painter, who's the one running this company that Hunter Biden's connected to, this PR company, met with the number 2 official at the Ukraine embassy in Washington and asked to meet officials in Kiev around the same time Joe Biden visited there. Ukrainian embassy employee Oksana Shulyar emailed Painter afterwards. With regards to the meetings in Kiev, I suggest that you wait until next week when there is an expected vote of the government's reshuffle. Ukraine's Washington embassy confirmed those conversations between Shulyar and Painter, but said the reference to the shakeup was not specifically referring to Shokin's firing. Regardless, we can see already that this public relations firm's contact with Ukrainians trying to, as soon as it's becoming evident that Biden's going to make this threat, they're trying to get in touch with Ukrainian prosecutors. Painter then asked one of Ukraine embassy workers to open the door for meetings with Ukraine's prosecutor about Burisma investigation, the memo shows. Eventually, Blue Star would pay the Ukrainian official money for his help with the prosecutor's office. So they're going to a Ukrainian official in the embassy, who they end up paying to get a meeting with the interim prosecutor. At the time, Blue Star worked in concert with an American criminal defense lawyer, John Beretta, who was hired by Burisma to help address the case in the Ukraine. This case settled in January 2017 for a few $1 million in fines and tax issues. Do you hear that, all the people that said the case was buried before Biden issued his threat? No, 2017 it was buried. Beretta, Painter, Tramontano, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden's campaign have not responded. On March 29, 2016, the day Shokin's fired was announced, Beretta asked to speak with Yuri Sevruk, the prosecutor named to temporarily replace Shokin, but was turned down. The day the prosecutor got fired, the defense attorney for Burisma's trying to talk to the new prosecutor. Blue Star, the public relations firm that Hunter Biden's on, using the Ukrainian embassy worker it had hired, eventually scored a meeting with Sevruk on April 6, 2016, a week after Shokin's firing. Beretta, Tramontano, and Painter attended the meeting in Kiev, including the Blue Star. Sevruk memorialized the meeting in a memo that the General Prosecutor's Office provided to me, stating the 3 Americans offered an apology for the false narrative that had been provided to U.S. officials about Shokin being corrupt and inept. They realized the information disseminated in the U.S. was incorrect and that would facilitate my visit to the U.S. for the purpose of delivering the true information to the State Department management. They're worried, right? Imagine why they're worried. Biden gets this guy fired. They don't know squat about the new prosecutor. So they're going and filling him out. And they're like, hey, we know that former guy wasn't corrupt, you know? We get it, man. We get it. We just want to smooth this over. We're going to help you by taking you to Obama's State Department, and they'll hash all this out. Trust me. What is Obama's State Department doing involved in this? The memo also quoted the Americans saying they knew Shokin pursued an investigative corruption investigation against Burisma's owner, only to be thwarted by the British allies. These individuals noted that they had been aware that the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine had implemented all required steps for prosecution, and that he was released by British court due to the underperformance of the British law enforcement agencies. Geez, so all the people that are saying Shokin was corrupt had skin in the game, didn't they? All these globalists that were sycophants and friends of Obama, like the Atlantic Council, like Christine Lagarde at the IMF, like a bunch of Obama associates, like the UK people. The memo provides a vastly different portrayal of Shokin than Biden's, and its contents are partially backed by subsequent emails from Blue Star and Beretta, who's the defense attorney for Burisma, that confirmed the offer to bring Ukrainian authorities to meet the Obama administration in Washington. How in God's name do the lawyers for... Biden's furious because this corrupt guy Zlochevsky's not being investigated by Shokin. So he threatens to withhold $1 billion. This is Biden's story, by the way. So he threatens to withhold $1 billion to get this prosecutor out and get a real prosecutor in that will investigate Shokin. Okay? That's what we're told. The same day that occurs, the defense attorneys and the PR people for this corrupt oligarch and his company that Joe Biden's son happens to be on is contacting the new prosecutor saying, hey, come on, we want to take you to the U.S. State Department so we can work this out. Why would the State Department, if they thought that this guy was so corrupt, have anything to do with helping them? For instance, Tramontano wrote to the Ukrainian prosecution team on April 16, 2016, saying U.S. Justice Department officials, including top international prosecutor Bruce Swartz, might be willing to meet. Quote, the reforms are not known to the U.S. Justice Department, and it would be useful for the Prosecutor General to meet officials in the U.S. and share this information directly. Beretta sent a similar email to the Ukrainians, writing that, I think you would find it productive to meet with DOJ officials in Washington, and offered to provide the contact info for Schwartz. I would be happy to help, he added. He himself a former DOJ official. Do you see how corrupt this is? Why would the oligarch that's considered corrupt, that Joe Biden hated so much, that wasn't being prosecuted, so Joe Biden threatened $1 billion of aid to get the prosecutor fired because he wasn't looking into this corrupt oligarch, simultaneously that corrupt oligarch's lawyers are reaching out to the new prosecutor saying, hey, let's work with the state. We'll introduce you to the State Department. We have the emails to prove this. This isn't conjecture. Now, again, let me be honest and play devil's advocate. You might say, but wait a minute. Do we have, of course, maybe these people are blowhards. Maybe Beretta and Blue Star are just blowhards and they don't actually have access to Bruce Swartz. But isn't that reason then to subpoena all the records they might have had with people in Obama's administration? Their own emails are saying they have it. So the explanation of, they lied in their emails, no, that doesn't cut it. It needs to be investigated. Someone's trying to investigate it. You know who that is? Donald Trump. And he's being criminally accused of criminal action and going under an impeachment hearing for that investigation. We are talking about corruption of the highest level of the Obama administration. Do you think there's an incentive for these Democrats and their media mouthpieces to all of a sudden not want that investigated? Every piece of evidence we have that's publicly available points to the exact same direction. All of it. That there was something really shady going on. And it seems more than likely that Joe Biden did something horribly corrupt and his son was doing something corrupt in the first place. And Biden did something corrupt to cover it up. It seems that way. But there's at least enough evidence to warrant a journalistic investigation and certainly a U.S. government investigation. Yet we are being told that pursuing that investigation is an act of corruption. And that's why Donald Trump needs to be impeached. Burisma, Beretta, and Blue Star continued throughout 2016 to try to resolve the open issues in Ukraine, and memos recount various contacts with the State Department and the U.S. Embassy in Kiev seeking help in getting the Burisma case resolved. In other words, memos show the U.S. The State Department was acting directly involved with the investigation in Burisma. You might say that's okay. They wanted the corruption investigated and solved, right? And Biden admitted that it was really corrupt and needed investigating because he knew how corrupt it was, right? So then why was the case buried? Why was this corrupt guy that everybody knows corrupt? The Anti-Corruption Action Center, the Intercept, if you go back and watch my video, the article that everyone's putting around by the Intercept, it cites the head of the Anti-Corruption Action Center that says Joe Biden was a saint. It actually makes the claim in that article that actually Joe Biden getting this prosecutor fired made it more likely his son would be investigated. It actually makes that claim. It makes that claim. That same woman, that same agency, which, by the way, the Obama administration stopped an investigation into, pressured Ukrainian prosecutors to stop it. That same woman says that the reason this, you read that Intercept article, the reason this is such a big deal is we know Zlochevsky's guilty. He's a scumbag, he's a criminal, we know it. Then why was the investigation buried? Why was he never charged? Whoop. Just days before Trump took office, Burisma announced it had resolved all of its legal issues, and Beretta gave an interview in Ukraine about how he helped navigate the issues. Two questions remain. One, whether it was ethically improper or even illegal for Biden to intervene to fire the prosecutor handling the Burisma's case, given his son's interest. That requires an investigation and expertise of lawyers. Yes, it does. Two, the second is whether Biden has given the American people an honest accounting of what happened. New documents I obtained raise serious doubts about the story's credibility, and that needs to be resolved. Up here it says, by the way, there's one last thing I wanted to show. Might take me a moment to find. This is Solomon who did this article. I have sued the State Department for any records relating to the meeting. Let me go back. Hunter Biden's American business partner, Burisma, Devon Archer, texted a colleague 2 days after the Times story about a strategy to counter the new wave of scrutiny. Okay, now remember what this Times story was. 4 months before Biden issued his threat, the Times did a story where they said Burisma, this company, has Hunter Biden on the board of directors, and it's being investigated for corruption. They contacted Joe Biden's office. Joe Biden's office said, Joe doesn't talk to his son about stuff. That's his son's game, not ours. So now all of a sudden there was scrutiny. So Hunter Biden's business partner, who was in the same company, Burisma, Devon Archer, he's texting someone about after the Times story, and he says, okay, there's now scrutiny on us. We need a strategy. And stated that he and Hunter Biden had just met at the State Department. So he's admitting, okay, things are getting real. So we went to Obama's State Department, we met there and discussed a strategy. The test suggested that there was about to be a new USAID project the embassy is announcing with us, and that it was perfect for us to move forward now with momentum. In other words, they who are under criminal investigation, that supposedly Biden wanted the prosecutor fired for not doing the investigation well enough, are working with Obama's State Department and a USAID project to get new momentum to get away from this scrutiny that they have. Solomon says, I've sued the State Department for records related to this meeting. The reason's simple. There is both a public interest and an ethics question to knowing if Hunter Biden and his team stopped State Department's assistant while his father was the vice president. It's unbelievable. Now, I hate to keep harping on this, but let's go back. Let's talk about just this article, and then I'll go back to what I was talking about before to give a summary of this. This information's been out 22 hours now. 22 hours. The documents listed. This isn't hearsay. It's not like these articles that say an anonymous source said. He gives the names. He gives the documents. Some of the emails and stuff we haven't got. But we have no reason to believe he doesn't have them. He's reading directly from them. They disprove the story. The defense that was given. It's not just that the media and that the Democrats and the people you see on Twitter that are defending Biden and the Democrats and they're saying that Trump needs to be impeached, it's not just that they're wrong. It's not just that they're completely wrong. It's that they're so arrogant and so vile and disgusting. They laugh at you. They call you a conspiracy theorist. They put pictures of Alex Jones up. They just keep posting the same article without saying crap. Am I going too fast? Okay. Let me slow down and go through the three things again. All right? Forget about the names. Okay? You could go back. I'll post the article. I'll post the article again. You could read the names yourself. Let me go back and do the three things, because I know I get excited when I start talking a little fast. By the way, if you're watching me not in a live stream, you could go to settings and slow down what I'm saying, but I'll try to slow down here, okay? Three things this article says. One, there's this defense company. Forget their name. The defense man happens to be named Beretta, okay? The PR firm that Joe Biden's son's also part of is called Blue Star. The day that Biden forced the firing of the former prosecutor, they're contacting the interim prosecutor. They meet with him a week later because they paid a Ukrainian embassy official to get the meeting. That interim prosecutor had a memo that John Solomon got a hold of. That memo says that these people who are defending Hunter Biden's son's company, Burisma, the one that was under investigation, so people that are defending Hunter Biden's interests, they have no reason. They're not Trump supporters. They're not conservatives. They're not people that were looking into Biden for corruption. These are people defending his son's company. They admitted to the interim prosecutor the week that he got fired, we know that the U.S. officials that demanded this firing were spreading disinformation. We know that Shokin wasn't corrupt. We know that he was actively pursuing an investigation into Burisma. And we're sorry for that. And we would like to get you in touch with people at the U.S. State Department so we could work all this out and get this investigation done with. The story, the reason that's important is as follows. Joe Biden used $1 billion of U.S. aid to get the prosecutor that happened to be looking into his son fired. That should raise red flags for anyone objectively. But the media and the Biden defenders and the Democrats have said that this wasn't corrupt for two reasons. One, the investigation into his son's company was already closed. This article disproves that. It shows that the investigation didn't close down until 2017. The investigation was ongoing. The mere fact that the attorneys for Burisma were contacting the new prosecutor shows that the investigation wasn't over. If Burisma was left off the hook and the investigation was closed, what incentive would their defense lawyers have to then reach out to the new prosecutor? They would say, yes, we won. We don't have to deal with Ukrainian prosecutors anymore. Instead, they're saying, work with us in the U.S. State Department to get this case dealt with. So that was a lie. Defense number one was a lie. The only other defense was Shokin, the prosecutor that Biden had fired, was corrupt. And Biden said he was firing him for being corrupt, or he wanted him fired for being corrupt. And a bunch of other people in the world said that. Now, it doesn't matter what a bunch of other people in the world said, did it? Does that, just because everyone says this guy was corrupt, does that mean Joe Biden couldn't have wanted him fired for personal reasons? Of course not. Remember, everyone said James Comey was corrupt, and Rod Rosenstein wrote a memo saying to fire him. And Comey even admitted he wasn't investigating Trump. But nonetheless, despite all that, when Trump fired him, we had a 2-year investigation into that, didn't we? So why wouldn't the same apply here? But irregardless of all that, when you bring up that maybe this guy wasn't corrupt, when you bring that up, everyone says, all the Biden defenders, all the Democrat defenders, all the media, they say, doesn't matter. Everyone said he was corrupt. That's all that matters. Anyone you have that says otherwise must be corrupt themselves. They must be a Trump fan or a conservative. Joe Biden's son's company, own lawyers, own PR firm, admit this guy wasn't corrupt. They admit that the very week that the former prosecutor was fired. They apologize for it. They say that the officials were spreading disinformation. They say that they want to get the new prosecutor in touch with the State Department to work it out. That proves, the reason that that's important is it proves the defense of Joe Biden. What Joe Biden said was a lie. Now you might say, well, maybe these defense attorneys for some reason were out to get Joe Biden. That makes no sense. And so maybe they weren't telling the truth to the new prosecutor. Nonetheless, it at least cast a heavy shadow over Joe Biden's claims that warrants investigation. Again, I go back. The investigation into Russia collusion. We know that it was started based on spies from the FBI going to people connected to Trump. We know that the Steele dossier was never verified and was sourced from Kremlin officials. We know that it was paid for by Hillary Clinton's team. But despite all that, the defense given is, but the allegation was so serious that we had to investigate. Can you think of a more serious allegation than a vice president using $1 billion US tax dollars to get his son out of decades in prison, possibly, and a story that would have came out right before the 2016 election? So it's election interference and personally beneficial to Joe Biden. Can you think of a more serious allegation? So it's clear that the serious nature of the allegation proves that this deserves an investigation. That's the first thing in this article. Biden's son's own defense lawyers for his company said that Joe Biden was wrong and he was lying, willfully spreading disinformation. Number 2, Shokin, the actual prosecutor that was fired. I read his sworn affidavit just from September 4th that says he was forced out by Joe Biden because Joe Biden wanted him to end the investigation into his son. And that repeatedly the president of the Ukraine talked to Joe Biden to end this investigation. I'm sorry, I didn't send the article. And here's the Solomon article again. And I showed how other evidence backs that up, such as the conversation Joe Biden gave, or his bragging conversation. That proves it. Such as the fact that Poroshenko never fired him before the threat, as is admitted in Biden's own statement. All of that backs this up. Such as we have other independent confirmation from people like Litsenko, the next prosecutor, that said the Obama administration actively pressured him and other Ukrainian agents to influence prosecutions. All of that adds up. That's number 2, the actual prosecutor saying Biden forced me. Now again, I stop here for a minute and say, if a prosecutor was fired who was looking into Donald Trump or Donald Trump's family, it wouldn't matter if everyone thought they were corrupt. The media would be beating down that prosecutor's door trying to get an interview. The Democrats would be subpoenaing that person immediately to show up to testify because they would say, how dare Trump fire someone who's looking into him? But with Biden, it's the exact opposite. Number 3, memos show that Hunter Biden's own associate, Devon Archer, and memos from these defense attorneys in Blue Star show that they were saying they were working with the U.S. State Department under Obama to try to resolve these issues. This makes no sense if we believe Joe Biden's story. Because Joe Biden's story is, I wanted this guy fired because Zlochevsky, the guy that owns Burisma, is corrupt. And this prosecutor Shokin refuses to look into this corrupt guy. So I'm going to fire him to make sure we get someone who's not corrupt to look into this. So we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden wanted a more thorough investigation of his son's company. That's what they want us to believe. Of course, we know that the investigation was then buried afterwards. He admits that he was pressured. Yeah, you're right. Biden admits that Lutsenko, the second prosecutor, was solid. That prosecutor admits that he was pressured. So we know then that these people got fired. So Biden really doesn't like this Zlochevsky guy, or he thinks he's corrupt, so he wants him investigated. Why then, the day that he got them fired, would other people in Obama's State Department be working with lawyers for that corrupt oligarch to try to contact the new prosecutor and work things out? Does that make any sense? This guy's horribly corrupt and all of his businesses are horribly corrupt. So much so that we have to threaten $1 billion until the prosecutor looking into him is fired so we can get a real prosecutor looking into him. Meanwhile, other people in that same administration are talking to that same corrupt oligarch's defense attorney saying, hey, let us help you out and talk to this new prosecutor and smooth things out. Yes. How do you say your name? Blase? That's exactly right. Pelosi and Schiff should be investigated. Again, one of the videos I did on this is not just a Biden-Obama scandal. It's also a scandal of the media and the Democrats that have buried this. And even now, when the information's coming out, refuse to talk about it. While at the same time trying to make it criminal to investigate this. That's the real scandal. Yes, Biden should be investigated. Yes, Obama should be investigated. They should all be subpoenaed. They all should be hauled in front of Congress to demand to answer questions. Obama should be there right now. Scandal-free administration. That's what this Solomon document shows. Now, for those of you that joined late, the first half, or I guess quarter at this point, because I've been going for a while, of this was about the letter that the 3 Democrats sent. In May of 2018, 3 Democrats sent a letter that did the exact same thing that they're accusing Trump of doing. It said, "Hi, Ukraine. It's good. We're really happy that your economy's doing well and your military's doing well. And we've supported you. But we heard a rumor from the New York Times. They don't mention the New York Times, but we heard a rumor that you're going to stop your investigation and cooperating with the Mueller investigation into looking at Donald Trump. We strongly urge you to reconsider." With Trump, they said the problem was Trump called and said, "Hi, how you doing, President of Ukraine? Your economy's doing really well. We give you a lot of aid. Europe should give you more aid, but we do a lot for you." The President of Ukraine says, "Thank you. Yeah, you're right." Trump says, "Can you do a favor for us? We have this Mueller thing going, talking about election interference. What about this group CrowdStrike? We hear that there was potential election meddling from the Ukraine in our 2016 election. Can you look into that?" The Ukrainian president says, "Yeah, it's important to look into that. We think that it's important to ensure that all corruption's rooted out. We're already in talks with Giuliani about this." Notice it was the Ukrainian president that mentions Giuliani. Trump then says, "Yeah, good. And I heard that you had this really incredible prosecutor that was actually really investigating corruption, and he was forced out by Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's son was being investigated by this guy. You should get to the bottom of that. If you hear anything, I'd encourage you to contact Giuliani and Barr." Yeah, we will. That's it. Now, the Democrats are saying, because Trump talked about their economy and then said, "Can you have a favor?" and then way down later mentioned Joe Biden, that's proof that Trump was threatening them with that aid unless they investigate Joe Biden. CNN's fact check article that I went through literally says things like that this is a lie, that the Democrat senators, it says, they never threatened. Let me just read it again for you. They said it was a request, not a threat. The 2018 letter from Senators Leahy, Durbin, and Menendez did not include any threat at all about U.S. assistance to the Ukraine or anything else. It didn't even mention U.S. assistance. This is CNN. This is the only news story I could find about that, defending that those 3 senators sent that letter. No one asked Adam Schiff. No one asked Pelosi. No one asked Schumer. CNN does a fact check, says, "Oh, it's a lie that was a threat." What's the first thing they say? The 2018 letter from these 3 senators doesn't include a threat at all about U.S. assistance or anything else. It doesn't even mention U.S. assistance. Now, let me rephrase something for you. The 2019 call transcript between Trump and President Zelensky of the Ukraine doesn't include any threat at all about a U.S. assistance to the Ukraine or anything else. It did not even mention U.S. assistance. You see? Do you see how CNN spins this as, oh, when the exact same thing was done and was public knowledge since May of 2018, it was okay for the Democrats to do it. It says it expressed concern about a New York Times article that said the Ukraine had, with the aim of avoiding Trump's anger, stopped cooperating with the Mueller investigation and froze that investigation. It urged the Ukraine to reverse course. It is difficult to conclusively fact-check Trump's claim that the Democrats' letter implied that assistance to the Ukraine was at stake. Different people read between the lines differently. CNN's argument is literally, yes, Trump never specifically says quid pro quo, but if you read between the lines, that's what he did. When we have evidence of Democrats doing the exact same thing, they say, if you read between the lines and think that that's what they did, that they offered a threat of quid pro quo, you're wrong. And I'm not going to go through the whole article again, even though there's more people listening. You can go back. The whole first 40 minutes was me going step by step through this article. The theme of this live stream was as follows. Damning evidence that disproves the media and the Democrats' claims about impeachment and about these senators and Biden being innocent is just ignored by them or straight out smeared. Have you heard how many, most of you that follow me are probably on Twitter or on Above Top Secret or something like that are watching this right now. Surely you've heard about this letter from these senators. It's been all over the place. Tucker talked about it. Laura Ingraham talked about it. I've seen people on Twitter talking about it. Mark Levin talked about it. Hannity talked about it. There was the guy from the New York Magazine talked about it, which is not even a Trump place. No, that was the Biden story. Nonetheless, a bunch of people were, this is public knowledge. CNN did a report on this letter in May of 2018. This letter is open on a .gov website since May of 2018. This is not hidden information. Yet not one Democrat, not one media person, not even one Republican said one word in over a year about why these senators should be impeached or what they did was criminal activity or anything like that. One media outlet that I could find, CNN, referenced it and defended it. And their defense is just literally, nuh-uh. Yes, this is what Trump mentioned at the UN press conference. And thank you, Brenda. I really appreciate it. Not one. Now, how could that be? If we had a free, independent press, or if the Democrats were actually concerned about the truth, wouldn't they then say, you can't have it both ways? And look, if you watch my channel for long enough, you'll know my stance from the beginning is, if Trump committed crimes or people connected to him committed crimes, that's fine. I have no problem with them being held to the letter of the law. My only thing is, apply the law equally. A theme that I have all throughout, if you watched my live stream with my friend Tom earlier today, Tom disagrees. He thinks that Rudy Giuliani being involved is a really bad thing. But he also says that if other non-executive officials in previous administrations were being sent to foreign countries with evidence, then that too was illegitimate. Tom is consistent, even though we disagree. That's great. That's all I ask. Reasonable people could disagree. So there's only two possible stances on this. Either my stance, which is both Trump's conversation with Zelensky and these Democrats' letter, neither of them are reason for impeachment or we're breaking the law. It might be considered shaky. I don't even think it's really that. I think it's natural. If you really believe that someone is committing crimes and that a foreign country is withholding evidence of that and won't work with U.S. agents on it, then I don't have a problem with contacting them and saying, hey, we think you should give that evidence. I don't have a problem with it. I didn't have a problem with it when it was these three Democratic senators looking into Trump. I don't have a problem when it's Trump looking into 2016 election interference that benefited the Democrats. That's my position. Neither is a crime. Or your position could be the position of the Democrats and the media, which is what Trump did was a crime. But that means that what these Democrats did was a crime. And so if the punishment for the crime for Trump is impeachment, then the punishment for these Democrats is also impeachment and holding impeachment hearings. That's being consistent. I disagree, but I can at least tip my cap and say, well, hey, at least you're consistent. But what you can't do is say, when Trump does it, it's a crime. When the Democrats do it, it's not a crime. Oh, sorry, my dogs are barking a little now. That's not legitimate. That's corruption. That's being a partisan. By the way, if you think what the Democrats did was a crime and not Trump, you're probably also not being honest. With this CNN article, it's a joke. So again, the theme of this is CNN and New York Times and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and Schiff and Schumer and Pelosi and Hirono and Booker and everyone except maybe Tulsi Gabbard. I saw one other Democrat, I can't remember his name, I think from New Jersey, that was against this impeachment. But all the Democrats that are for impeachment, the majority in the House now, some Republicans, or so-called Republicans like Bill Weld, who recommends Trump be executed over this, or Justin Amash, all of them don't have problem one with this stuff. They just ignore the evidence that goes against their narrative. It's just blatantly ignored. And when you look at people, when you look at the people on the ground, we don't have access to those people, do we? We don't have access to Chuck Schumer. I got access to people on Twitter that are defending Chuck Schumer, right? And so when I present this evidence, they just laugh and say, yeah, it's nothing, it's crap, you're full of it, you're a Trump-tard. It's actual evidence. At this point, it is undisputed and ignored. That is criminal. When the media says, did you ever notice when they do the White House press dinner and you listen to them, anytime you listen to them speak and they're giving awards to themselves, what do they say over and over? Oh, Trump's attacking the free press. Do you understand how important the institution of the free press is to a country? It's how the people know what's going on. It's how the people hold truth to power. It is one of the most important things in a democracy, so the people could understand what their powerful officials are up to. When the media says that, they're right. They're absolutely right. The problem is, we don't have a free press. That's what makes it even worse. They're supposed to be holding that torch. They know how important it is, and they laugh in the face of it. Instead of being a free press, they want all the accolades and all the treatment that comes. They want all the, talk of how great and how hero and how brave they are. But they don't do any of the work. They don't do any of the important roles. They want the it's like stolen valor, right? These people that dress up as, military members because they want the adulation. That's what the press, we're untouchable. No one can attack us. We're doing such a great job. We are so important. We're so great. And then they're just mouthpieces. And instead of holding truth to power, it's the opposite. They beat you down. They beat the regular person down and defend power. That's what they do. They're advocating for their own personal beliefs. Or if you're my friend Tom, you don't think it's for their ideological reasons. You think it's for monetary benefit. Just as bad. But they're certainly not a free press. And when you present evidence, when some fat guy on a chair like me, getting paid $0, working 70 hours a week, busting my hump, hundreds upon hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, tweets and posts on websites, looking into documents, reading hundreds of documents, not getting a dime. When I post this stuff and I do the job the free press is supposed to be doing, with the help of real free press people like John Solomon, which you should follow Solomon. He's the real person who did all this work. But again, why are people like us important if there's a John Solomon out there? Because Solomon has integrity. And Solomon is a journalist, not a pundit. Solomon just presents you the information. The media ignores that information. All the people that shape our discourse ignore that information, or they spin it. And so we need people out there that are taking that information and talking objectively about what it means. And are talking about how it's terrible that the media is spinning it. Because it's not Solomon's job to say, look, the Washington Post is wrong when they say this about my reporting. That's not his job. As soon as he starts to do that, then he's accused, oh, you're not a journalist now, are you? Now you're a partisan. So where are the people like, it's me. It's you people that are watching this. A Friday and you're watching some fat blowhard rant and rave, right? Thank you. I do like working on Above Top Secret too. Putting stuff there. I know when I get a good post though. When I get a good, because no one disagrees with it. It's just ignored. And so that's what we see happening. That used to be what you saw on Twitter or what you would see on Above Top Secret. You post something really good that shows like corruption or it disproves a mainstream narrative and it's just ignored. People that agree with you are like, wow, great work. People that disagree with you just don't mention it. And then next week something new comes up and we forget all about it. But now we're seeing the media do that. They don't address this stuff that directly answers their claims. This is not a light situation. You're talking about removing the President of the United States that was duly elected by the people, and doing so at the behest of CIA agents and intel agents. If you've watched my videos before, you've heard me say this 1 billion times. If nothing else, if you watch everything and you don't believe it for whatever reason, you think that I'm full of it, and you think that every piece of evidence I showed about the Russia investigation, about the Kavanaugh thing, about the Covington thing, about this, all the stuff that I've covered, if you think that it's all crap, don't listen to me. Listen to Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer's being interviewed by Stephanopoulos right after Trump was elected. And he says, Trump's making a huge mistake criticizing the intel agencies because they'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. One of the leaders and most powerful people of one of the 2 political parties in this country admits that he must be afraid, that people in elected positions like him or Donald Trump must be afraid of unelected intelligence officials. You can't criticize them. You can't go against them. I don't care what you think of Donald Trump. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you think of all this evidence I just put forward. That should scare the crap out of every American. Now remember, we used to have all these people on the left that were distrusting of the intel agencies. Remember after the Iraq War? You remember after that? They said the CIA lied us into it. Bush lied. People died. All of those intelligence people, the military-industrial complex, all they want war is to get rich. That's what they told us. 15 short years later, they're saying, not only do we trust the intel agencies, but we support them actively leaking and actively working against, breaking protocol to go against Donald Trump because we hate Trump that much. This isn't just my theory. Let's go through it. Comey, Brennan, Clapper, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Rebecki, Baker, Rosenstein. How many people do we have to go through? This isn't just my theory. They all admitted they broke protocol. They did, every time the IG, so far 2 of them have been referred for criminal prosecution. Comey and McCabe. Name one president ever that's happened to before. The intelligence agents, 15 years ago, the media, CNN, right? Remember, you know why Fox News has such a bad reputation. Anytime you talk about anything, people are like, Fox News, where'd you hear that, Fox News? Oh, yeah, you listen to Fox News. I turned on CNN and I heard Fox News sucks. Yeah, Fox News does suck. Again, like I was saying with my friend Tom, all of them suck. That doesn't mean there can't be good people in there. I like Tucker. I like some of the guests on Hannity, you know. I like Greg Gutfeld. Jesse Waters is okay. But nonetheless, the same could be true of CNN and MSNBC. I don't watch them that much. I don't watch Fox that much, to be honest. I like John Solomon. I like Dan Bongino. I like Mark Levin. I listen to them more. They're not in Fox. I mean, sometimes they're guests on Fox, but anywho, irrelevant. But I'm just saying, why is it that everyone, the big trope, all these documentaries about out Fox, Rupert Murdoch, blah, 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 because it was all stemmed from the Iraq War. Because under George Bush, Fox was seen as the cheerleader for Bush. And they're right. They were. They were terrible. But all the media places went along at first with the war. And then they started to say, remember this? They said, we should have questioned the administration and the intelligence officials more. We're sorry in the media. We were lied into that war. We're sorry. Never again. Next time we'll be more scrupulous. Have they been? Were they more scrupulous when Obama was droning everyone to death? Or starting wars in Libya or Syria or Yemen? Were they more scrupulous? Nope. Once their guy was in charge, they didn't care. They became Fox News for Obama, except worse. They were just sycophants for Obama. That's all they were. We know that. They declared him scandal-free. After everything I just showed you, scandal-free. That's what they said. Those same people, all of those news people, all of those lefties that were my friends, all the Bruce Springsteens. Remember, I used to go to, I was into punk music. There used to be albums like No Effects, Punk Against Bush, Rock Against Bush. Bruce Springsteen's, yeah, we're going back to the hippie days, man. We're protesting the war. I was there, man. I was just in college. 2003, I was in college. You know, all my friends were lefties. The Iraq War, this sucks. I was a Ron Paul fan. Screw these foreign regime change wars. Yes, the lefties were right there with me. That's the most important movement. Cindy Sheehan's out there. We got to stop these wars. It's terrible. And, now our guy's in, and now we back the intel agencies. And I'm the one that's changed if you ask them. It's unreal. I mean, and so the same people, I mean, again, but what do we expect? I mean, we could see it in a 1 day's sample size. They don't think that the senator's letter, they think, well, you'd have to read between the lines to think that that's shady. But with Trump's transcript, they're like, well, we read between the lines and yes, it is impeachable. So, of course, they're not going to worry about, over a span of 10 years, contradicting themselves. Well, the intel agencies are terrible, and we have to hold truth to power and question them when they try to do this stuff. Versus, what, all the intel agencies are breaking the law to get Trump? Good. That's a good thing. They're truly patriots. I mean, it's insane. So, I'm going to be going here soon. My wife will be back soon, and I should probably try to make dinner. But if I could legitimately ask everyone, again, I will admit, one thing about me, I'm an honest hypocrite. I'm an honest scumbag. I would like more people to watch. Ultimately, what are my goals? I would like to run for office. I ran for Congress as a Republican. I didn't win in a special election. I will run again at some point. In the interim, I would like to be helping spread a message and help defend Trump, and at least help defend in getting the corruption in the establishment outed, whether it be in a political sense or in a kind of journalistic sense like I'm doing here. I work 70 to 80 hours a week every week. I am not asking for money or anything like that. Just share my videos. Recommend them to some people. That's it. Half of it is because I'm a scumbag and I like the attention and I would like to get big enough to do more of this and do it more full time. Yes, that's true. I'm an honest hypocrite and scumbag, I admit. But I swear to you that half of it is that the message needs to be out there. I don't care. Rip off my video. Make your own video going through this material. I'm absolutely fine with it. Maybe you could do it better than me. Maybe you could reach people. That's great. That's the important thing. This corruption needs outed. The country is at stake. So the information getting out there, that's the important thing to me. So, yes, share my video. Please hit like and subscribe if you can. And follow me on Twitter. I'm at NorRobert at Twitter, and I'm also at BitChute. I think, who knows, but I think that YouTube and Twitter and stuff censors my, not censors, but doesn't advertise my stuff, doesn't put out there a lot. So it's hard for me to reach people. I mean, I'm doing my best. I'm trying to do the research. I really, and here's some other things. If you would like to be on the show, please get in contact with me. I'll put my personal email here. It's real simple. It's just my name. It's rob.nor@gmail.com. Send me an email. All you need is a Google account. You don't have to use your real name. We don't have to use video view. We could use just audio. Especially if you disagree with me, I would like to talk to you. I had my friend Tom on today. Those are the best conversations, when people aren't just all sitting around agreeing. People that come from different ideologies and are, Tom's a Democrat. He's a Klobuchar fan. But yeah, you don't join anything you don't want. And if it's any hassle to you, don't like and subscribe to me or recommend me. That's totally fine. If not, but if you do those things, if you're on Twitter or if you're on YouTube, I would be gracious for that. And I really want to reach out to people that disagree. I really want to have these conversations. I'm open to admitting I'm wrong if I am. I think that even when I've had, you can go back, you can go to live streams. This is a true story. I was arguing with some guy on Twitter one night about the fact that Elizabeth Warren put out a study that said that it compared earning capacity from whites to blacks and Hispanics. And I said, why didn't you include Asians? Because Asians actually make more than whites. And that kind of goes against Elizabeth Warren's narrative that this country is racist and white supremacy and, white privilege and all that, because actually it would show Asian privilege if anything else. Anyway, it's not a really important argument, just a comment I made, and this guy argued with me, and we argued until 5 a.m, probably 40 posts between me and 40 posts with him, right, back and forth, and we were snippy with each other, and at the end of it I said, look, if you want to have a serious conversation, not 140 characters at a time, I have a YouTube channel, let's do a video. He agreed. I've since done 5 or 6 videos with that person, 4 and 5 hours at a time. He's a Democrat. He disagrees with me on most things. We find agreement in things, and I think that even though we vehemently disagree, we treat each other with respect. I don't use his real name. I haven't called him names or done anything like that. Like, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get this information out. I'm trying to talk to people that I disagree and things like that. So anyways, enough bragging myself up. Then another thing, I was talking to my friend Tom about this morning. I hate bragging myself up, and I hate asking people for favors like please like and subscribe. Like, if you notice, I never put my YouTube videos, I never tag them like I know I should, like, bombshell, Trump destroys Schumer. Like, I don't do that. My titles are always like, media's ignoring evidence, and things like that. I never put the hyperbolic crap in there, because I'm really trying to be myself and be honest. So, again, I'll just finish up here. I got to get going. But I really do appreciate you all listening. I really do. And, I would really like to get this information. If you use the exact same information in this video to make your own video, more power to you. I'll like and subscribe. Get this information out there. If you could recommend me to other people, because I really do think that I'm presenting stuff that I don't see other people presenting. And I think that it's crucially important that it dismantles the entire argument that's being made for Trump's impeachment and for Biden to not be corrupt. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go let my dogs out and get the house ready for my wife coming home. So I'll probably be putting more material up as the weekend goes on. So please look forward to that. And thanks again, and have a good one.